Shadows swallowed the hooded figure. He moved silently through the desolate alleyway. Two thugs lurked on the crumbling steps behind him. One spat a vile taunt into the dirt. The foul saliva landed mere inches from his comrade's boot. Curses erupted in the damp air. The thug flared with sudden rage, yet the hooded phantom walked on unfazed. This was the cursed studio district, a wretched hive of endless noise and unending filth. Hidden above this urban decay sat his sanctuary, a miserable 180-square-foot rooftop shack. A heavy sigh escaped his lips. Cheap instant noodles for dinner. Again. His name was Bong Juyak. 25 years old and utterly destitute, he ground his bones to dust across 3 grueling jobs: a convenience store clerk, a meat grill slave, and a disposable day laborer. This wretched soul is our main character. He bled and sweat like a chained beast, yet his pockets remained eternally hollow. The reason was brutally simple: a crushing mountain of debt, a vicious burden he had to clear, no matter the miserable cost. He possessed no legendary talents. He was nothing but expendable flesh and bone. In this merciless world, his future was a suffocating abyss. No bright salvation awaited him. He cursed his pathetic, bottom-feeding existence. Then, reality shattered. A glowing azure screen materialized before his eyes. The system declared his awakening. He froze entirely. Half-chewed noodles hung limply from his jaw. Tremors racked his body as cold sweat drenched his face. Scalding broth scorched his skin. The bowl crashed to the floor, shattering instantly. A terrifying scream tore from his throat. Pure panic hijacked his mind. This made zero sense. An awakening was meant to be a divine blessing. It was the ultimate jackpot, a golden ticket to rewrite destiny itself. A miracle far surpassing any grand lottery. But a grim truth overshadowed this glory. Such riches belonged only to the living. The dead could spend no gold. The tower was an absolute death trap. Demonic beasts would gladly tear his flesh from bone. Lethal frost or hellish flames could incinerate his soul. Vile poisons lurked in the shadows. One misstep into a hidden snare meant a gruesome, bone-crushing demise. He was a coward who turned away from screams. Survival dictated he ignore every injustice. He dodged every conceivable peril with obsessive paranoia. He wouldn't even dare walk beneath a swinging crane. He was the dirt beneath society's boots, a total nobody for 25 miserable years. And now the heavens claimed he was an awakened? Absolute utter nonsense. Suspicion poisoned his mind. Exhaustion must be playing wicked tricks on him. He muttered a command to open his status window. The holographic text actually manifested. Faction: Black Tower, Korea. Level: 1. Class trait: Summoner. Capacity: a single entity. His unique skills blazed on the screen. Targeted summon, random summon, dismissal. His basic rights were equally clear: 1 daily descent into the dreaded tower, and a limitless dimensional inventory. The unyielding light of the system burned away his doubts. This impossible reality was true. Every awakened received a defining trait. The paths of power were vast. Divine swordsmanship, lethal spearmanship, impenetrable shield arts, unerring archery, supreme martial arts. Some controlled titan gigantification. Others wielded devastating heavy strikes, divine healing, or summoning. The summoners were commanders of legions. They bent elemental spirits, phantom beasts, colossal golems, and ferocious demonic beasts to their will, to command an army of unearthly horrors. That was the absolute power of a summoner. What manner of beast would bow to him? A spark of arrogance ignited in his chest. He possessed supreme power now. It was time for a majestic display. He struck a dramatic pose and roared to the heavens. Summon! Absolute silence followed. Humiliation burned his cheeks. He desperately chanted, "Random summon." Still nothing. Then the bitter truth hit him like a hammer. The ironclad law of the system was absolute. Divine powers and magical skills belonged solely to the tower. They could never pierce the veil of the mundane world. Beyond reading the glowing blue screen, he was powerless. Outside the deadly trials, players were fragile mortals. Even a fool with an internet connection knew this basic fact. A crushing wave of embarrassment swallowed him whole. He accepted his powerlessness in the mortal realm. But then, the system glitched. A blood-red alert flashed across his vision. Initializing random summon. His pupils shrank to pinpricks. The impossible was happening. A blinding portal of chaotic light ripped through the air. From the vortex, a human silhouette stepped forward. Juyak's mind shattered. Terror widened his gaze to the breaking point. Cold sweat poured as he gasped for air. How could the system breach reality itself? And the entity was no beast. It was flesh and blood. The stranger offered a crisp military salute. 100% human, reporting. Juyak's sanity crumbled. A successful manifestation in the mortal realm. No elemental spirit. No stone golem. A living, breathing human being. The stranger paused, sniffing the air like a hound. His eyes locked onto the spilled instant noodles. A feral hunger gleamed in his gaze. Master, may I devour one bite? Completely paralyzed, Juyak croaked. Sure. The crimson-haired phantom lunged for the cheap meal. Juyak remained petrified as a stone statue. His legendary awakening felt like a cosmic joke. No fearsome demon of destruction. Just a brazen, starving freeloader begging for scraps. The man devoured the noodles with beast-like ferocity. Torrents of sweat cascaded down his flushed face. The heat was destroying him. Juyak stared in pure disbelief. The legendary summon was losing a battle against mild udon broth, but the terrifying anomaly remained. The laws of reality had been breached, a divine skill cast flawlessly in the human realm, and it yielded a human soul. Such heresy was unheard of in all of history. His trembling fingers summoned the command screen. The forbidden rules revealed themselves. His domain ruled over humans and demi-humans alike, spanning from rare grade all the way to mythic heights. Super rare, special super rare, up to the god-tier legend special super rare. A telepathic link bound master and servant across all dimensions. Their minds were forever connected. The existence of Gacha-style rarity tiers was a shocking revelation. The universe operated on brutal luck. Was this a twisted game of celestial roulette? Suddenly, the system burned 3 golden rules into his consciousness. The absolute mandates of the summon. First commandment. The servant must shield the master's life with their very soul. Second commandment. The servant shall bow to the master's word with absolute submission. Third commandment. Should obedience lead to the master's death, the mandate of protection shall overwrite all orders. Absolute submission. The words tasted like dark ambrosia to him. But who was this crimson-haired devourer of noodles? The system unraveled the man's identity. A barrage of classified data illuminated the dark room. A monster born of bloodshed. The psychotic butcher of the cruel guild. Name, Jon Kasac. Grade, super rare. Class, apex human assassin. He could anchor to reality for 6 agonizing hours. No satisfaction rating was recorded. Dismissal triggered a brutal 3-hour penalty cooldown. His reputation was steeped in infamy. A living nightmare for his own shadowy guild. An utterly unhinged lunatic dripping with madness. Yet his lethal precision was terrifying. A 99% kill rate. He had even slaughtered a supreme 5th Circle Dark Mage. This violent history slammed directly into Juyak's brain. A splitting agony seized him. Then, an ominous presence gripped his soul. He plunged into an abyss of endless dark. The ground rushed up to shatter his bones. Out of the shadows, a lethal assassin lunged forward. Juyak braced for the fatal strike, but the phantom blade phased right through his chest. The illusion stabilized. This was a vision of the past. He was witnessing Jon's blood-soaked memories, the assassin's severed heads with breathtaking artistry, blood sprayed like crimson rain. But his madness was undeniable. He meticulously wrapped the severed heads in velvet ribbons. Grotesque gifts of death, truly the mark of a madman. The memory shifted, revealing Jon's final moments. A single, catastrophic miscalculation. He had breached his ultimate target's inner sanctum, but he had walked straight into hell. The target was the undisputed god of blades, the Empire's supreme swordmaster. Before a single breath could be drawn, a flash of divine steel tore the room apart. Jon's torso was cleanly severed in 2. That gruesome death marked the end of the memory. Back in the filthy room, reality snapped into place. Jon whispered directly into Juyak's ear. Deep in thought, master? Juyak nearly leaped out of his skin. Terror seized Juyak's heart. He stumbled wildly backward, thrashing his arms in pure panic. A pathetic shriek escaped him as gravity claimed him. The assassin merely tilted his head in innocence. He sought only one thing. A command from his new deity. Juyak swallowed his suffocating fear. He was the master of this realm. The golden mandate bound this killing machine to his will. Absolute, unbreakable obedience. He inhaled deeply to steady his shaking voice. Clean up that spilled broth, and wipe down the table. The legendary assassin moved like lightning. A flurry of domestic perfection. Not a trace of defiance. Every single word was executed flawlessly. He had to test the limits of this power. Would a humiliating decree break the bond? The assassin's eyes gleamed with hollow loyalty. Your word is absolute law, master. Juyak issued the ultimate test of pride. Bark like a dog. A demand for utter degradation. The rag halted on the damp table. The air instantly turned freezing cold. Juyak's heart hammered against his ribs. Had he awakened a sleeping dragon? This man was an apex predator. His warrior's pride should have shattered the room. A bloodbath seemed inevitable. But then, the madman smiled. Woof, woof. The cheerful barks echoed in the tiny room. Juyak's jaw unhinged in absolute disbelief. With trembling fingers, he raised a single thumb. The absolute dominion was confirmed. Boom, boom, boom. Violent pounding shattered the door. Demonic voices roared from the other side. Open up, you rat. We know you're in there. A chill ran down Juyak's spine. The loan sharks had arrived. It was the day of reckoning. Juhyuk commanded the assassin to rise. A crushing debt of 10 million won weighed upon his soul. The banks had turned their backs. Despair had driven him straight into the jaws of underworld predators. Cruel winter had shattered his father's bones. Medical bills loomed like a storm. His younger brother's future hung in the balance. He walked into the abyss because he had no other path. He believed he could outrun the debt. He was wrong. The principle remained an immovable mountain. 5 million won had already vanished into the void of interest. It was a fool's gamble. Yet, even faced with the past, his trembling hands would make the exact same pact. Heavy footsteps echoed outside. The predators demanded an audience. Juhyuk's gaze snapped toward the shadows. John's blade was already drawn. The assassin thirsted to sever the intruder's head, but bloodshed was not the master's will. One wrong move would spark an absolute massacre. Juhyuk ordered the killer into the shadows of the washroom. Complete silence. Absolute stillness. The deadly phantom simply tilted his head, asking if he was permitted to draw a breath. Juhyuk granted him that basic right. He turned the lock. The door creaked open. Instantly, a heavy, violent hand clamped down upon the summoner's neck. A towering brute loomed over him. The thug mocked his healthy appearance, masking deadly threats as false concern over missed payments. Fear paralyzed Juhyuk's limbs. He could only bow his head and offer hollow apologies. He stammered that the transfer was complete. The predator smiled a demonic grin. He whispered a sickening alternative. If the burden grew too heavy, his flesh could pay the toll. His organs were ripe for the black market. One kidney was enough to survive, the monster sneered. From the corridor, another thug chimed in with venomous intent. They had set their sights on his younger brother. Fresh blood yields a higher bounty. Youth was a premium currency in their twisted world. Rage and terror warred across Juhyuk's darkening face. The towering thug caught the shift. He dared the young man to throw a punch. Juhyuk swallowed his pride. He forced a pathetic, trembling smile. He swore he harbored no such thoughts. The thug leaned in with a freezing glare. One wrong step, and he would vanish from this world without a trace. The door slammed shut like a vault. The suffocating pressure finally lifted. From the pitch-black bathroom, John emerged. Not a single sound had escaped him. Juhyuk marveled at the absolute stealth. The assassin merely bowed. His master's word was absolute law. A crushing wave of exhaustion slammed into him. Bone-breaking shifts. A sudden system awakening, the summoning of a human weapon, and a brush with the criminal underworld. It was too much for one mortal day. The towering debt pointed toward the deadly dungeons. But he was no hero. A coward would be torn apart in those monster-infested floors. John broke the silence, awaiting his next mission. Juhyuk offered him an out. If the assassin wished to vanish, the summoning could end right now. The lethal killer made a bizarre request. He wished to gaze into the glowing box. Television. How an otherworldly assassin knew of broadcasting and instant noodles remained a mystery. Juhyuk simply nodded. The glowing screen illuminated the assassin's face. A mortal drama played out before his cold eyes. Juhyuk collapsed onto his mattress. This entity was a weapon forged in blood, yet having another soul in the empty room felt strangely comforting. Exhaustion dragged him into the abyss of slumber. Darkness claimed his senses. Morning shattered the peace at 8 o'clock sharp. Juhyuk opened his heavy eyes. The room was empty. The phantom assassin had seemingly dissolved into thin air. He assumed the time limit had simply expired. A blurry memory of an ethereal interface lingered in his mind. He dragged his battered body out of bed. The morning news flickered across the television screen. Foam filled his mouth. Then, the broadcaster's grim voice pierced his ears. A massacre had painted the streets of Jongno-gu, Seoul. The notorious Smile Cash loan sharks had been utterly annihilated. The toothbrush halted in his hand. 3 targets, 3 severed heads. The toothbrush clattered against the porcelain sink. The anchor revealed a chilling detail. The severed heads were tied with elegant red ribbons. Blood froze in Yoo-hyuk's veins. Only one phantom struck with such theatrical malice. The color drained from his face. He was the master of a complete, unhinged psychopath. The carnage dominated the national broadcast. Headless corpses swam in oceans of crimson. Shattered fingers told a tale of brutal torture. Their decapitated heads sat on desks like grotesque gifts. Pure terror gripped Joo-hyuk's heart. He was an accomplice to a bloodbath. He stared deeply at the horrific crime scene. The precision, the sheer madness. The signature of his loyal assassin was written all over it. Reality began to warp around him. Behind the convenience store counter, a nightmare materialized. A severed head wrapped in crimson ribbon rested beside the cash register. The dead loan shark's lifeless eyes stared back at him. Joo-hyuk flinched in absolute horror. The gruesome illusion multiplied. Headless torsos reached out for him. Severed heads lined the snack aisles like morbid trophies. He stumbled backward, crashing into the metal shelves. The phantom gore vanished. A bewildered customer stared at his panicked face. He bowed frantically, masking his fractured sanity. The shift felt like an eternity in hell. His mind was shattering under the weight of the murders. He could not function like this. Tomorrow's labor would have to be abandoned. A heavy sigh escaped his trembling lips. Was his tiny apartment the staging ground for a serial killer? He summoned the system interface. The killer's true profile flashed before his eyes. The mad assassin of the Cruel Guild. Rank: super rare. Classification: human weapon. Manifestation limit: 6 hours. Satisfaction rating: none. Cooldown period: 3 excruciating hours. The system guaranteed the master's safety. Yet, sharing a room with a maniacal butcher chilled him to the core. He triggered the summoning sequence. Instead of a shadow, a prompt blocked his vision. The system demanded a satisfaction rating for the assassin's previous service. The blank rating in the catalog finally made terrible sense. He had ordered the phantom to watch television. Instead, the maniac painted the city red with unsanctioned blood. Fury bubbled within Joo-hyuk's chest. He raised a trembling finger to smash the 1-star rating. He flipped off the glowing system window in pure frustration. A single star was the ultimate punishment, but empathy stayed his hand. His mother survived on customer ratings as a service worker. He knew the soul-crushing weight of a terrible review. With a heavy sigh, he compromised and locked in 3 stars. Space distorted. The phantom materialized from the void. A bright, chillingly innocent smile stretched across Jon's face. He bowed gracefully, thanking his master for the 3 celestial stars. He vowed to spill even more blood to earn perfection. That angelic face betrayed no trace of a ruthless killer. Joo-hyuk could hardly believe this boy was a mass murderer. He stared straight into those hollow eyes. "Did you slaughter the men from yesterday?" Jon's smile brightened. He proudly declared the trash had been disposed of. The breath left Joo-hyuk's lungs in a violent rush. The confession struck like a physical blow. A genuine monster was standing inside his bedroom. Nausea twisted his guts. His heart hammered wildly against his ribs. He desperately clawed for composure. The system bound this beast to his will. He was safe. He forced out a trembling question. How had he tracked them down? The assassin had never even seen their underworld base. The killer's eyes gleamed with lethal pride. A phantom mark of pursuit had been placed on the intruders. Joo-hyuk realized it was an otherworldly assassination skill. But the extreme escalation baffled him. Why unleash absolute carnage over a simple threat? The logic of a killer was flawless and brutal. To eliminate a future threat, you strike first. Joo-hyuk roared that he never issued a kill order. Jon calmly raised a finger. The absolute laws of summoning dictated his blade. Article 3. Absolute obedience was paramount. However, a hidden clause existed in the shadows of the system. If the master's life was in peril, mere commands became void. Protection overrode submission. Bloodshed was authorized to secure survival. Joo-hyuk tested the boundaries of this terrifying loyalty. Would you disobey if I ordered my own death? The assassin confirmed he would defy that command. Joo-hyuk pressed the issue. Yesterday was merely words, not a lethal threat. The killer tilted his head, admitting the clause left room for interpretation. In the assassin's twisted mind, mercy was a weakness. Those predators were ticking time bombs. They would eventually come for his master's life. Decapitating them was simply a logical, preventative measure. To Jon, it was a perfectly reasonable judgment. Juhyuk spat out the harsh truth. That was the logic of a complete psychopath. He instantly froze, apologizing for the fatal insult. But Jon merely laughed. Used to such colorful titles, Juhyuk understood the intent. But in modern society, this proactive butchery was catastrophic. He painted a terrifying hypothetical scenario. A simple walk down a crowded street, a momentary lapse in spatial awareness, accidental contact with a hot-headed gangster. Empty threats would inevitably fly. Do you have a death wish? I'll gouge out your eyes. Mere street-level posturing, but under Jon's twisted doctrine of protection, that foul-mouthed thug would wake up in hell, his severed head wrapped in a festive ribbon. One wrong bump could trigger a citywide massacre. The terrifying reality set in. Surprisingly, the phantom assassin dropped to one knee. Juhyuk flinched at the sudden submission. The master commanded him to listen closely. Random slaughter would not ensure his survival. This bloodlust would draw the fury of human laws upon them both. Jon countered that ghosts leave no trails. Juhyuk demanded absolute restraint. No more preemptive strikes. When Jon hesitated, the master forged an ironclad pact. Unsheathe your blade only when cold steel is pressed against my throat. Speculation must not end in decapitation. The lines of engagement were finally drawn. The assassin flashed a terrifyingly bright smile. He enthusiastically swore to measure his violence with perfect precision. A deadly contract had been rewritten. The conversation reached its end. Juak wanted his summon to return to the void, but Jon shattered the silence. He questioned if his master would truly abandon the tower. The word struck Juak like a physical blow. He froze in utter disbelief. Ascending that colossal spire was a legendary chance, a path to absolute glory. Yet terror paralyzed his mortal heart. The abyss of the tower meant certain death. He refused to throw his life away. He asked if another master had called upon Jon before. The familiar nodded solemnly. He spoke of a predecessor forged in pure courage and limitless strength. A heavy weight of deep shame crushed Juak's spirit. True awakened beings sacrificed everything for the world. He, however, lacked such heroic fire. He confessed his fear of dying in the dark. Jon opened his mouth to speak, but Juak aggressively cut him off. He branded himself a pathetic, worthless coward. The response defied all expectations. Jon declared him the absolute greatest master. Juak stood completely stunned. The familiar revealed a shocking truth. A summoner's ultimate virtue is absolute survival. Blind courage is merely a deadly poison. Fearless masters rush blindly toward their doom. And when the master falls, the summon perishes alongside them. Jon made a solemn vow. He would bathe his own hands in blood. He would conquer the darkness in his master's place. He urged Juak to embrace his supreme caution, to survive and claim a long, peaceful life. Shadows consumed the room that night. Sleep violently evaded Juak's grasp. The towering obelisk haunted his chaotic thoughts. Finally, he concluded that the blood-stained path was not his destiny. His crushing debts had vanished alongside the ruthless collectors. That miracle alone was enough. He chose the path of an ordinary mortal. He swore to grind through safe, mundane labor. Surely, an honest life would bring him eternal peace. Suddenly, a jarring ring shattered the silence. The caller ID displayed his father's name. The old man asked about his ongoing rehabilitation. Then, reality delivered a devastating strike. They needed to transfer to a massive, expensive hospital. Furthermore, his mother was facing brutal termination from her job. His father forced a brave, trembling tone. He begged his son not to carry this heavy burden, claiming he merely called to check in. He promised to visit soon, a desperate vow to share a simple meal together once more. The old man pleaded with him to avoid reckless labor. The tragic call finally disconnected. Silence reigned for only a fleeting second. Then, Juak's eyes ignited with desperate resolve. He immediately geared up in his full protective armor. He forged a frantic, absolute rule. He would only step onto the first floor, just one brief glance into the abyss. At the first scent of death, he would instantly flee. Fate had aligned perfectly. His punishing part-time shifts were already canceled for the day. The summoning ritual prepared to ignite, but a sudden realization halted his hand. Why rely on the unpredictable Jon? He could invoke the chaotic void once more. Perhaps a mythical, super-rare legend would descend to his aid. The system mercilessly rejected his command. Random invocation was strictly locked. A brutal countdown mocked him from the digital screen. 28 days, 11 hours, 8 minutes, and 37 seconds remained. A devastating, full-month penalty he never saw coming. Destiny forced his hand. Jon was his only remaining weapon. Guilt gnawed fiercely at his soul. Did the familiar sense his master's brief betrayal? Juyak averted his trembling gaze. He declared their imminent descent into the hellish tower. The familiar praised this sudden explosion of courage, but instantly retracted his words. He commanded his master to banish all bravery. Juyak desperately defended his logic. He swore to only test the treacherous waters and immediately retreat. Jon ordered him to discard all mortal weapons. The familiar swore to become his ultimate blade and bloodthirsty hound. He claimed absolute dominion over the tower's impending slaughter. Juyak would not need to move a single muscle. The carnage would be handled entirely. A cold system prompt materialized before his eyes. Do you wish to breach the Korean Black Tower? Only the dreaded first floor permitted entry. With a trembling hand, he confirmed his fate. Instantly, gravity violently abandoned them. A guttural roar tore from his lungs. Jon anchored himself fiercely to his master's armor. The fabric of reality violently fractured. Juyak plunged into a blazing digital abyss. Torrents of blinding light and celestial code ripped past his vision. Absolute terror seized his violently gasping breath. The blood drained completely from his face. He clamped his eyes shut against the devastating descent. Panic clawed relentlessly at his fracturing mind. The familiar locked him in an unbreakable grip. They plummeted together through the endless glowing void. Finally, their boots crashed against solid, unforgiving earth. The infamous first floor stretched out before him. A desolate, nightmarish wasteland of utter despair. The dimensional shift ravaged his mortal senses. Nausea struck like a venomous blade. He violently emptied his stomach onto the barren dirt. The familiar checked on his master's fragile state, assuring him this gruesome sickness would soon fade. Without hesitation, Jon marched forward. They crossed the invisible boundary of the sanctuary zone. Instantly, a surge of system energy rewired Juak's biology. His physical stats erupted to match his awakening. Lethal characteristics and hidden combat arts were finally unlocked. The intoxicating rush of a true player surged through his veins. Despite sitting at absolute level 1, boundless power hummed beneath his skin. A crimson quest window flashed ominously. The objective was brutal and absolute. Annihilate 5 ironhide rotgrubs within 2 agonizing hours. The kill count stood at a pathetic 0 out of 5. Failure meant either shameful retreat or a gruesome death. Suddenly, Jon's lethal gaze locked onto targets in the distance. Juyak braced his trembling nerves. This wasteland was the ultimate crucible to forge true hunters. These grotesque ironhide rotgrubs were nothing but fleshy training dummies. Their offensive capabilities were utterly laughable. However, their mutated armor was legendarily impenetrable. Slaying even one required grueling, relentless destruction. 3 minutes to crush a single beast. Now, Juyak stood among the ranks of awakened players. A spark of defiance ignited his resolve to fight. But Jon stepped smoothly into his path. The familiar questioned why a king should ever bloody his own hands. Juyak stepped bravely toward the monstrous target, only to realize his hands were completely empty. He spun around to request a blade from his familiar. But the grotesque behemoth suddenly reared up behind him. A colossal shadow of death eclipsed his vision. All color drained from his terrified face. A desperate cry for salvation ripped from his throat. Jon smiled at his master's supreme wisdom. In a blinding flash, the familiar vanished. A single, devastating strike obliterated the monster's skull. Gore rained down as Jon propelled himself toward the remaining horde. He ordered his master to simply observe the absolute slaughter. Twin daggers materialized in the assassin's terrifying grip. A maniacal thrill danced in his murderous eyes. He unleashed a storm of flying steel. The blades pierced multiple armored behemoths simultaneously. He triggered his deadly blade explosion skill. The monstrous bodies ruptured in a symphony of catastrophic carnage. Juyak watched in absolute paralyzed awe. An impossible, instantaneous massacre. The crimson quest window shattered into glorious victory text. The first floor trial had been utterly decimated. A glorious bounty of 100 glowing magic stones materialized. The system blared with golden celestial light. An impossible S+ completion rank for the Korean Black Tower. A shimmering platinum badge materialized in his trembling palm. Euphoria drowned out his previous terror. This path to supreme wealth was absurdly effortless. But he remained ignorant of the massive storm brewing above. Across the entire nation, reality seemed to pause. Holographic screens forcibly invaded the vision of elite players. Veterans halted their brutal training regimes. High rankers froze in the middle of chaotic clubs. The same impossible notification echoed through the minds of every awakened soul in South Korea. The sealed gates to the second floor now welcomed his ascent, but the system forcefully ejected him from the towering abyss. Immediate expulsion was the rule upon conquering a domain. The violent dimensional warp wrenched his guts once more. He glanced at his digital clock in pure disbelief. The entire massacre took exactly 5 mere minutes. Jon offered a deep, respectful bow for a flawless victory. Juyak stammered that he had literally remained frozen in place. His familiar smirked, praising that absolute stillness as a masterclass in survival. Rumors spoke of rookies vomiting blood to crack a single grub's shell. Yet his own trial was a laughable walk in the park. He pulled the radiant magic stone from his inventory. The mystical artifact pulsed with raw, intoxicating energy. It was his first time holding such concentrated celestial power. These luminous gems were the absolute lifeblood of modern civilization, the supreme fuel for the world's greatest industries. Market values had plummeted since the primordial era of the towers. Yet, 100 grams still commanded a staggering 50,000 won. 2 bloody decades had passed since the ominous obelisks pierced the Earth's crust. Global humanity had adapted to the chaotic laws of the apocalypse. But this shimmering platinum crest defied all known logic. It was an artifact completely absent from common human knowledge. Logic hardly mattered against cold, hard cash. Adrenaline surged as he realized he secured 50,000 won in 3 fleeting minutes. Back in the mortal realm, Jon settled in to binge a soap opera. Juyak summoned a massive feast and called his familiar to the table. The lethal assassin fiercely sniffed the incoming banquet. Jon interrogated his master about the fiery scent of the braised pork. Juyak defended his honorable choice of a mild, regular serving. He strictly remembered his familiar's aversion to heat. Yet the assassin's sharp senses detected a microscopic trace of spice. Juyak realized this deadly phantom had absolutely zero resistance to mortal seasonings. Despite the mild heat, the assassin devoured the meal with fierce joy. He bowed deeply, thanking his lord for such supreme grace. Juyak tilted his head in sheer confusion. Was this archaic, military dialect permanently burned into his familiar's tongue? The familiar paused his feast, asking his master to clarify. Juyak pointed out his extremely rigid, soldier-like speech patterns. Jon confessed. This dialect was forged alongside his former master, a habit carved through endless battles together. Juyak silently cringed, comparing it to the lingering ghost of an overly attached ex-partner, an echoing influence from a long-dead era. Jon instantly offered to sever this habit if it displeased his new lord, but Wa quickly raised his hand in protest. He admitted the bizarre, knightly loyalty was actually highly entertaining to witness. A dangerous confidence now hardened his resolve. The legendary abyss was not an execution block. With supreme backing, it was entirely conquerable. Dawn broke, and he proudly uploaded his new ironclad itinerary, a masterclass schedule worthy of an elite, supreme alpha. His brutal grind still included daylight retail and midnight smoke-filled grills. But the bone-crushing manual labor in between was officially terminated. That miserable slot was now dedicated to a far greater purpose. He would dive into the abyss and violently farm the tower with his lethal shadow. The Celestial Pact was invoked once more. Jon emerged, proudly wearing a flawless 5-star system review. Juyak openly confessed he would have shattered the scale to award 10 absolute stars. A sinister yet loyal smile crept across the familiar's face. He was fiercely honored to serve such a satisfied king. Juyak questioned the weight of his master's judgment. Jon lowered his head in absolute reverence. A higher score did not merely offer praise, it unlocked unimaginable power. Extended ethereal presence, unprecedented rank ascension, and the sacred privilege of being summoned. They crossed the threshold of the Black Tower's second floor. Their divine mandate? Exterminate 10 swift and bloated abominations. The hourglass granted them exactly 2 hours. The slaughter counter read 0 out of 10. Death or retreat meant absolute ruin. Juyak narrowed his eyes at the erratic beasts. Their sickening speed defied all mortal logic. He gripped his weapon and asked for his orders. Jon merely offered a chilling, confident smile. Strategy was useless here. The slaughter would take exactly 3 minutes. He vowed to paint the floor with their blood and escort his master safely home. Juyak casually proposed a victor's feast of fried poultry and cold ale upon their return. Jon bowed deeply with profound gratitude. Then, the assassin vanished into the shadows. Carnage erupted as blades met flesh. Juyak could only watch the sheer insanity unfold. The screams ceased. The trial was conquered, and new power surged through his veins. A pristine 200-gram magic stone materialized before him. The system's voice echoed with divine authority. An S++ rank had been bestowed upon the Korean Black Tower's second floor. A radiant platinum emblem rested in his palm. Achieving an S++ rank again felt like cheating the heavens. The annihilation was too flawless. He had conquered a mythical dungeon before his mundane morning shift even began. Dawn broke, and the third floor awaited them. Their prey this time? 10 frostbound demonic grubs. Jon praised his master's flawless descent into the combat zone. Within mere moments, the frozen battlefield was reduced to silent ruins. The heavens granted a massive 300-gram magic stone. Once more, the golden notification shattered the silence. An S++ rank for the third floor of Korea's Black Tower. Another legendary platinum emblem materialized. The fourth floor fell in an ocean of blood. The fifth floor suffered the exact same devastating fate. 5 S++ rank badges now gleamed in his inventory. The cosmos recognized his supremacy and unlocked a divine privilege. A legendary awakening trait enhancement cascaded over him. The sacred laws of the system were violently rewritten. His spiritual capacity expanded beyond mortal limits. The number of simultaneous souls he could bind had increased to 2. The glowing status screen confirmed Juyak's ascension to level 6. He was now a master of 2 ethereal warriors. Yet his astral catalog remained completely barren. His sacred arts were limited: designated call, chaotic manifestation, and spiritual release. His mortal limits restricted him to 1 tower entry per day. A dimensional void served as his personal vault. He possessed absolutely 0 martial prowess, but his newly awakened authority meant another lethal shadow could guard his life. Jon alone was a natural disaster, annihilating everything in his path. The sheer magnitude of an S++ reward was utterly terrifying. The trials ahead would inevitably evolve into a brutal war of attrition. He needed that extra shield. 20 agonizing days remained until the cosmic wheel of chaotic manifestation could spin again. Survival dictated absolute patience. In exactly 20 days, a trinity of absolute power would march as one. He would command from the safety of the rear. His invincible vanguard would shatter every obstacle. And tomorrow, the dreadful 6th floor awaited its conquerors. The following day, Hanamung, Seoul. Inside the fortified walls of the Awakener Management Administration, 2 imposing figures sat on a leather sofa. The air in the room was suffocatingly tense with anticipation. A man muttered under his breath, calculating the exact moment the heavens would speak again. Morning, dusk, the dead of night. A sharp-eyed woman in a tailored suit stepped forward. She pierced his anxious thoughts, asking if he was waiting for the heavenly decree. He flinched like a cornered beast. His face flushed with sudden embarrassment. He demanded she cease piercing his mind with such frightening accuracy. This nervous commander was team leader Jeon Gwang-il. The piercing intellect beside him was Deputy Director Lee Mina, both pillars of the Awakener Management Administration. He desperately demanded to know if the cosmic decree had descended. Her expression turned dead serious as she confirmed his fears. The Black Tower had spoken once again. Korea's 6th floor had been utterly decimated with an S++ rank. The absolute authority of the Black Tower's global broadcast had been ringing relentlessly. Every single chime carried the terrifying weight of an S++ annihilation. Gwang-il's instincts screamed the undeniable truth. This apocalyptic force was a single entity, violently tearing through floors 1 to 5 in perfect sequence. This absolute monster possessed a talent that mocked the very gods. If this unidentified phantom was achieving flawless S++ victories on every single level, his horrifying realization was violently shattered by a thunderous fist striking the mahogany table. Director Park Gong-soo stood with blazing, furious eyes. Korea's absolute peak was merely A rank. The very existence of a higher realm was a total myth. They had absolutely no idea an S++ clear would force the entire planet to bear witness. In this bloodthirsty modern era, stealing awakened power was the ultimate geopolitical weapon. Vicious syndicates and foreign empires orchestrated brutal, silent abductions in the shadows. The strong devoured the weak without mercy. Before a rival nation could sink their claws into this legendary talent, they had to secure him. The director's voice boomed with absolute command. Every single newly registered player must be hunted down and scrutinized. 2 days later, Juyak cast his gaze toward his next victim, the dreaded 8th floor. He smirked at the flawless rhythm of destroying 1 hellish floor per day. Anything below the 10th floor was a pathetic playground for the weak. A noxious, deadly swamp materialized around them. The system demanded the absolute eradication of 10 Crimson Thorn Frog warriors. A hulking amphibious beast lunged with murderous intent. Jon unsheathed his sinister blade in a blur of deadly motion. The swamp ran thick with monster blood as he unleashed a relentless storm of steel. The divine chime echoed. The 8th floor had fallen. A massive 800-gram magic stone pulsed with raw energy. 5 divine healing elixirs materialized from the void. The cosmos trembled as he achieved another impossible S++ rank. The Korean Black Tower bestowed yet another legendary platinum badge upon its conqueror. Jon bowed low, praising his master's unimaginable brilliance. Yet, Juyak had not lifted a single finger. The assassin firmly declared that braving the cursed tower gates was the ultimate test of courage. It was solely by the master's divine grace that their bloody ascent was so effortless. The Shadow Warrior offered a grim warning. Beyond the cursed 10th floor, true nightmares awaited in the dark. This slaughter had only taken 3 minutes. Basking in his absolute victory, Juyak decided to grant his loyal blade a sacred reward. He tossed the assassin a handful of mortal currency. He commanded his servant to walk beneath the sun, indulge in worldly pleasures, and feast like a king. The ethereal timer still held an abundance of precious sand. A stern warning followed. Absolutely no bloodshed in the mortal realm, yet the merciless killer fiercely rejected the gift. Juyak stared in total disbelief. Jon solemnly vowed to remain anchored to his master's shadow, choosing the mundane glow of a television over freedom. The chains of absolute loyalty bound him even in times of peace. Juyak declared they would summon a feast of fried poultry to their fortress. The stoic assassin's eyes gleamed with childlike thrill. Jon executed the delivery call with absolute precision, ensuring the spices were mercifully mild. Meanwhile, Juyak turned his terrifying gaze toward his newly acquired spoils. A divine elixir forged in the deepest abyss of the tower. He pushed it toward his loyal vanguard without hesitation. He dumped the glowing, magical minerals onto the wooden table. A heavy silence fell as he plotted his next absolute move. 3.6 kilograms of raw mystical power rested in his void space. Liquidating these stones in the underworld market would yield a staggering 1.88 million. The time had finally come to transform his bloody victories into worldly wealth. The fated 10th day of their bloody crusade finally dawned. The ominous gates of the 10th floor loomed menacingly in the abyss. Juyak had just returned from his deceptive life as a mere mortal wage worker. Shedding his mortal disguise, his mind raced. He had initially intended to merely test the waters of this apocalyptic dungeon. Instead, he had become a relentless conqueror, crushing a new floor every single day. Even yesterday's grotesque trial. The man-eating corpse flower of the 9th floor had been utterly reduced to ash. Victory was always an absolute certainty. But the heavens showering him with S++ relics was an intoxicating rush. He had become so dangerously comfortable that he completely forgot his loyal servant was a deranged triple homicide assassin. With a commanding thought, he dragged the killer from the void. He bestowed the absolute maximum rating of 5 points. The heavens recognized this unbroken chain of perfection. The system violently expanded Jon's ethereal tether. By 1 full hour, Juyak smirked like a sovereign ruler. Absolute praise yielded absolute power. The merciless killer aggressively formed a massive heart over his head, dripping with fanatical gratitude. Another hour to slaughter in the name of his god. Together, they stepped into the pitch-black maw of the Korean Black Tower. The divine system flooded his veins, forcibly enhancing his mortal flesh to match his awakened soul. Lethal combat arts were suddenly unlocked within his mind. As the sinister 10th floor materialized, the overwhelming surge of power was undeniable. His very biology was undergoing a violent, miraculous recalibration. Explosive, godly strength coursed through his muscles. A terrifying vortex of raw mana ignited violently within his core. His spirit roared with an absolute, undeniable arrogance. He was no longer a mortal. He was an unbridled beast of war, ready to trample the heavens. Drunk on this apocalyptic power, he boldly commanded his servant to step aside. He would join the bloody fray himself. Jon's eyes widened in sheer, absolute panic. The assassin vowed that if a single drop of his master's blood was spilled, he would crush his own skull into the cold stone floor in penance. But Juyak's blood was boiling with the fury of an unchained beast. He aggressively pushed forward. The desperate assassin begged his master to remain on the throne, pleading that his divine praise was the only weapon needed. Juyak fiercely demanded to taste battle, but as he turned his head, his soul froze. A massive, horrifying eye stared back from the abyss. A colossal, nightmarish insect towered over him like a mountain of death. The illusion of godly power shattered instantly into pure, primal terror. How did mere mortals ever slaughter such titanic abominations? Swallowing his fear, he quickly adjusted his posture. He arrogantly scoffed, declaring that unleashing 2 warriors upon a mere bug was a devastating insult to his supreme pride. The deadly assassin blinked in absolute confusion. He respectfully argued that slaughtering monsters carried no shame whatsoever. But Juyak vehemently doubled down, sweating cold terror while violently insisting that his fragile supreme dignity simply could not bear the insult of teamwork. The 10th floor boss radiated pure terror. He immediately stepped back. He left the vanguard duties to Jon. A monstrous praying mantis lunged forward. But Jon did not flinch. His eyes narrowed with lethal intent. He vaulted onto the beast's massive exoskeleton. In a blur of merciless strikes, he carved the monstrous insect into bloody ribbons. The battle ended in absolute victory. The 10th floor was conquered. The system materialized his spoils. 1 kilogram of crackling magic stones. Once again, the impossible S+ rank flashed before him. A brilliant platinum badge descended into his palm. Jon returned with a triumphant gaze. The eradication was an absolute success. The massive gates of the 11th floor unlocked. Suddenly, space warped around them. They were forcefully expelled from the ominous Black Tower. His wealth of power was rapidly growing. He now possessed 5.5 kilograms of condensed magic stones. But the true prize awaited. 5 platinum badges had granted him a legendary perk. Now, he possessed 10. A new realm of power was about to unlock. Anticipation burned in his veins. The system revealed his divine reward. He could devour and copy a single skill from his summoned legion. A dazzling array of lethal techniques materialized. Blade explosion, shock break, vile ambush, poison dagger, shadow step, disruption, stealth, invisibility, polymorph. The choices were absolutely overwhelming. Jon observed his master's hesitation. His advice cut through the silence. Shadow step was the only worthy choice. The young master frowned in deep confusion. Why such absolute certainty? Jon's unwavering voice echoed. This was not a matter for debate. Shadow step was an absolute necessity. He demanded to know the reason. The knight's answer was brutally pragmatic. It was the ultimate technique for survival and escape. If catastrophic danger approached, his master could vanish into the darkness, swift and completely untraceable. Indignation flared hotly within him. Run away? Did he look like a pathetic coward? Would he abandon his loyal vanguard to face death alone? The very suggestion severely bruised his pride. Yet, logic eventually conquered his ego. He absorbed the shadow step. Supreme mobility was genuinely the foundation of all combat. Footwork dictated the boundary between life and death. But a thrilling question entered his mind. Would this supernatural art manifest outside the tower? He stood beneath the moonlit sky. He channeled the shadows, but absolutely nothing happened. Frustration bubbled up in his chest. Why did his summons answer him on Earth, but his skills failed? The system was cruelly inconsistent. Dawn broke on his 11th day of ascension. He made the fateful call. The Awakener Management Administration was on the line. He formally declared his awakening to the world. Jubilation erupted on the other end. A sovereign agent would be dispatched immediately. The government was moving to secure him. He opened his mouth to state his location. They swiftly cut him off. They already knew his exact coordinates. The eyes of the state were always watching. They were already closing in. Selling magic stones to the authorities was a dangerous gamble. Absolute exhaustion washed over his mortal body. It was the most terrifying leap of faith in his 25 years of existence. Meanwhile, the shadow of authority had already reached his doorstep. The agents had officially arrived. Director Lee sat in the sleek government vehicle. Guang-il rode in heavy silence beside her. He questioned her about the mysterious contact from Daegu. Her eyes remained cold and calculating. She dismissed the idea instantly. That amateur was definitely not their legendary S+ anomaly. Guang-il scoffed at the phantom legend. Did this godly player even exist? She ignored his profound doubt. Another awakening signal had just flared on their radar. She demanded his presence. He agreed with a heavy sigh. They had to hunt down every lead until their bones broke. A fierce ambition burned in his eyes. If they truly found the anomaly, he would shackle them to the elite vanguard. He would drown them in the most supreme benefits the administration could offer. They would sacrifice anything to chain a god. Meanwhile, suffocating tension filled his humble apartment. He scrubbed the floors with anxious energy. A heavy knock shattered the silence. The agents of the state had descended as expected. He unlocked his door and invited the storm inside. Team leader Zhang Guangil stepped in with an imposing aura. He presented Deputy Director Li Mina. She was not just a mere bureaucrat, she was a seasoned player of the tower. Her presence demanded immense respect. Realizing a veteran warrior had arrived, his heart hammered wildly against his ribs. She deliberately invaded his personal space. Her piercing eyes searched his soul. A flush of sheer panic betrayed him. Her predatory instincts screamed the truth. This was the monster they sought. The S+ legend flinched violently. He threw his arms up in sheer, uncalculated terror. Her statement crashed down on him like a devastating meteor. Did the state possess a secret method to identify the awakened? Cold sweat drenched his back. He forced a fragile mask of ignorance onto his face. He vehemently denied everything. But his trembling hands screamed his undeniable guilt. His body turned rigid as unforgiving steel. He sputtered out a pathetic denial. He claimed no knowledge of the phantom player. It was the most miserable performance of deception in history. Her hawk-like eyes caught every micro-expression. She had him totally cornered. Guangil struck out to scold his subordinate. He ordered her to cease the brutal interrogation. She effortlessly evaded his strike with a defiant smirk. He bowed his head in sincere apology to the trembling host. The young man swallowed hard. Was this a lethal psychological trap? Suddenly, a bizarre illusion materialized. A miniature black tower sprouted angelic wings. It wielded a shimmering star wand. It struck a ridiculously theatrical pose. It proudly declared itself as Tabi, the supposedly adorable mascot of the Korean Black Tower. The absolute absurdity violently clashed with the grim reality. The holographic entity began its dark lecture. It spoke of the colossal obelisk of despair, pitch black and overwhelmingly massive, dwarfing the greatest monuments of humanity. 20 years ago, the sky shattered. The apocalyptic monoliths descended upon the earth in a single terrifying night. The superpowers of the globe mobilized their supreme arsenals. Elite militaries and brilliant minds marched forward, but they were completely swatted away. An absolute divine barrier rejected humanity. It was a physical impossibility, a fortress beyond any mortal comprehension. The crushing enigma persisted until the chosen ones awoke. The players. The barrier yielded to them alone. Inside, they discovered a brutal, systematic crucible, a horrific game of survival, a merciless ascension, floor by bloody floor. On Earth, they were fragile, ordinary mortals, but within the dark walls they became absolute demigods, wielding apocalyptic magic and shattering physical limits. They plundered the abyss for legendary artifacts. Their bloody conquests singularly fueled the survival of the global economy. But a terrifying, world-ending ultimatum hung over their heads. What if the vanguard completely halted? If the frontier remained unconquered for 6 months, the apocalypse countdown would inevitably begin. The tower would detonate, erasing everything in its destructive wake. 3 years ago, humanity witnessed the catastrophic consequence. The city of Mumbai was wiped from the face of the earth, annihilated without a single trace. Every nation harbored 1 to 3 of these ticking time bombs. Korea possessed a single monolith, hidden deep within the treacherous peaks of Gangwon province. The burden of survival rested on a microscopic fraction of humanity. Barely 0.01 to 0.02% possessed the spark, a paltry 5,000 to 10,000 souls. A desperately small handful of warriors standing against total extinction. Yet, the Korean vanguard was forging an undeniable legend. The progression was flowing with smooth, lethal efficiency. The 65th floor had been bathed in blood and conquered. They stood as the second most powerful force on Earth, breathing down the necks of the American pioneers on the 66th floor. The mascot chirped its hollow reassurance. Do not fear the impending doom. The immortal players will shield society. Like the great conquerors of ancient history, humanity was now pioneering the abyss of the Black Tower. The awakened were the absolute burning hope of this dark era. Register your soul to the state, bleed for the world, and become a legendary hero. The nauseating propaganda video abruptly vanished. The digital illusion faded into nothingness. Guangil stepped forward. The real, high-stakes verification was about to begin. His voice dropped to a dangerous octave. Had he truly broken his mortal shell? The young man nodded with forced calm. He confessed to breaching the abyss. To prove it, he unveiled his spoils. The crackling aura of pure magic stones heavily illuminated the room. The heavy question fell like a descending guillotine. How deep had he gone? The 10th floor, he answered. The air instantly froze. Guangil and Mina exchanged a deeply lethal glance. The exact domain of the S+ anomaly. Her predatory instincts flared back to roaring life. She carefully circled her prey. Had he heard the divine broadcast that shook the world? The global notice. He swallowed his rising panic. He played the awestruck fool to perfection. He praised the mysterious legend, claiming total ignorance. It was a desperate, sweating masquerade. His performance was visibly crumbling. Gwang-il tried to soothe the suffocating tension. He told the boy to simply breathe. But the seed of doubt had blossomed into roaring suspicion. Was this mere anxiety? Or was a literal god hiding behind the face of a trembling mortal? They violently slammed the harsh reality of the system onto the table. The state chained its warriors into two distinct factions, the glorious elite climbing vanguard, and the disposable general assault force. The choice would forever dictate his destiny. The general force operated strictly in the shadows, mercenaries carving their own bloody, unscheduled path. Absolute freedom, but zero safety nets. The elite vanguard, however, were the elite hounds of the state, bound by iron chains to the Awakener Management Administration. The elites were thrust into the most suicidal sieges, forced to conquer the highest, deadliest floors. But in exchange for swimming in oceans of monster blood, the state would aggressively shower them with godlike privileges and supreme support. Earth was their ultimate mortal weakness. The state offered an impenetrable shield in the outside realm, absolute protection against unseen assassins. Furthermore, the elites were drowned in endless wealth, a massive guaranteed annual fortune. A horrifying, suffocating vision flashed in his mind. What if his divine S+ rank was brutally exposed? Vultures of the media would tear his life apart. His peaceful isolation in the affluent Hanamdong would be reduced to ash. He would literally choose death over that hellish spotlight. Gwang-il delivered the final, absolutely fatal condition. To join the elites meant absolute transparency. Every drop of blood spilled must be meticulously recorded. A sovereign body camera would broadcast his every slaughter. No secrets could ever survive in the vanguard. He shattered their expectations in a single breath. He violently rejected the throne. He chose the shadows of the general force. Gwang-il was utterly paralyzed by the decision. Why reject supreme power and infinite wealth? The young man bowed his head, claiming his talent was garbage and his heart was consumed by fear. Mediocrity was his ultimate, unbreakable shield. He would farm the safe zones and live a quietly invisible life. Gwang-il desperately urged him to reconsider his fate, but his resolve was as unyielding as a diamond. His path was set. He would hide his monstrous power from the entire world. Mina exhaled heavily. Another dead end. Another absolute failure. Countless climbers chose the path of cowardice. They stalled their progress to farm in safety, but to confess such weakness during an official test? That was completely unheard of. Such pathetic fear disqualified him instantly. Even if he begged to join the vanguard, he was the exact filth they had to filter out. The elite squad demanded one absolute virtue, an unbreakable will to ascend. Yet, they masked their disdain. They nodded in hollow respect. Gwang-il stepped forward. He issued a final command. Enter the tower. It was the ultimate trial to verify his awakening. A daily entry was a precious resource. Gwang-il urged him to hunt, to prove his worth in the shadows. But Ju-hyuk felt the hidden blade in those words. The evaluator was probing, desperately searching for the legendary S+ ranker. Ju-hyuk nodded. He accepted the challenge, but he laid down a crucial deception. He claimed his hunts dragged on, that he would drain the complete 2-hour limit. The evaluators merely smirked. Waiting was part of their duty. Mina offered him a venomous smile. She told him to pace himself. Ju-hyuk braced his mind for the ordeal. He casually offered them his home's comforts. Watch television and grab cold drinks. A mundane facade. Then, he crossed the threshold. His figure dissolved into the abyss. Gwang-il's eyes narrowed. The awakening was undeniably real. He turned to Mina for a verdict. She scoffed at the inquiry. His combat talent was a mystery, but his pathetic aura was glaringly obvious. Every word he spoke reeked of submission. Every gesture screamed of pure terror. She predicted a swift surrender on the 11th floor. Gwang-il demanded her reasoning. Mina's gaze darkened. The 11th floor was no mere battle. It was a crucible of pure, unfiltered fear. Gwang-il recalled the nightmare. The long-tailed tunnel centipedes. Their combat strength was negligible, but their grotesque forms shattered weak minds. A hunter had to slaughter 100 of those abominations. A coward would simply break. She foresaw him crawling back to the sanctuary, a broken, trembling mess abandoning the mission. Guang-il knew her instincts rarely failed. He prepared to contact the director. He had to deliver the grim news. Another false alarm. Within the suffocating gloom of the tower, Ju Hyuk called upon his shadow. The majestic summon Jon materialized. He bowed deeply, uttering words of profound gratitude to his supreme master. The system's cold voice echoed. Exterminate 100 long-tailed tunnel centipedes. The timer began its merciless 3-hour countdown. Current status, 0 out of 100. Failure meant death or eternal disgrace. Ju Hyuk stared into the darkness. His stomach churned at the thought of 100 writhing horrors. Jon's aura flared with lethal intent. He vowed to annihilate the swarm in 5 mere minutes, but Ju Hyuk commanded absolute restraint. The slaughter had to drag out. Over an agonizing hour, the S+ record had to remain untouched. Prying eyes lurked in the real world. Ju Hyuk whispered his cautious plan. He would even banish his summon to maintain the illusion. Jon absorbed the grand design. The master only needed to show his presence. Yet he chose to conquer the floor anyway. It was a masterful scheme of deception. A deliberate sabotage of his own legend. He would vanish from the S+ radar forever. Jon unleashed his blades upon the crawling beasts, but the carnage was too absolute. Ju Hyuk barked an order to stall the massacre. The storm of destruction subsided to a crawl. The rhythm of death grew sluggish. Ju Hyuk exhaled, believing the facade was secure. Suddenly, the earth ruptured. A massive carapace erupted from the shadows beneath his boots. Panic seized his heart. A tidal wave of venomous legs engulfed him. He commanded his mana to flee, but absolute terror paralyzed his limbs. Jon's eyes widened in sheer horror at his master's peril. The night erupted into a blur of divine wrath, erasing the abominations from existence. Righteous fury consumed the loyal summon. How dare these insects threaten the Supreme One? His strikes rained down like apocalyptic lightning. Monsters vaporized in an instant. Ju Hyuk watched the kill count skyrocket. He desperately screamed for him to stop. Hold back the power. That was the absolute command. But Jon defied the order, placing his master's survival above all. The massacre escalated beyond control. Then, the golden holographic letters shattered the darkness. Floor cleared. Rank S+, a platinum badge descended from the heavens. The gates to the 12th realm unlocked. Ju Hyuk stared into the void with dead, soulless eyes. The teleportation magic engulfed his frozen figure. The grand deception was ruined. Only 5 cursed minutes had elapsed. In the mortal realm, Mina checked the time. She expected the coward's retreat at any moment. Suddenly, a blinding global broadcast ignited the sky. Black Tower. Korea server. 11th floor obliterated with an S+ grade. From the pillar of light, Ju Hyuk emerged. Mina's jaw dropped in absolute shock. Guang-il sensed the shifting atmosphere. He demanded answers. She pointed a trembling finger at the fading broadcast. The timing was an impossible coincidence. But Ju Hyuk's aura had shifted. A deadly seriousness masked his face. A dark whisper escaped Ju Hyuk's lips. He cursed his own wretched fate. He never wanted to cross this line. The colossal shadow of his summon loomed behind him. Ju Hyuk's eyes locked onto the evaluators. You two must be silenced, he commanded. Restrain them at once. That was his intention. But a flash of merciless steel answered instead. Heads severed cleanly from their necks. Ju Hyuk shrieked in mind-shattering horror. Who ordered an execution? He roared at his bloody knight in absolute terror. The severed heads spoke his name from the bloody floor. They were wrapped in grotesque ribbons. He dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. But the nightmare abruptly shattered. It was pure hallucination. The 2 evaluators were simply staring at him. A torrential downpour of cold sweat drenched Ju Hyuk's spine. His fragile mind had conjured a terrifying illusion. He forced his trembling lungs to breathe. He swallowed his panic. Guang-il shattered the silence with burning fervor. The vanguard desperately needed his monstrous talent. Ju Hyuk stretched his lips into a painfully awkward grin. Drops of terror cascaded down his forehead. His words spilled out in a frantic, desperate rush. He wove a clumsy web of lies. A massive misunderstanding, he claimed. A glitch in the system. Another hidden master must have conquered the floor at that exact second. Guang-il crossed his arms, his gaze piercing. Such divine timing defied all logic. The lie was too fragile. But Ju Hyuk dug his heels into the deception. He swore upon his life it was a cosmic fluke. He violently denied his own absolute power. The evaluator pressed the blade of truth one last time. Are you truly not the one? Ju Hyuk did not flinch as he lied. Guang-il finally sighed in defeat. The awakening itself was verified. The paperwork of fate would now be drawn. Yet, the document slid across the table was a trap. It was no ordinary hunter's agreement. It pulsed with vanguard authority. Guang Il's voice swelled with dangerous pride. This paper transcended mortal standards. It was the mythical ultra-elite covenant, a singular existence in the entire hunting world. The terms were staggeringly absolute. 12 billion won in pure yearly wealth. Castles of real estate handed over freely, ultimate VIP protocol and god-tier security. But the final clause was the most terrifying. Total legal immunity. Whoever signed this became an untouchable deity. The laws of men would no longer bind him. Ju Hyuk felt the suffocating weight of modern nobility. Guang Il whispered the final revelation. Only one man on earth wielded this power. The absolute apex predator of Korea, Yu Chulin. The evaluator pushed the golden chains toward him. The nation's absolute wealth lay at his fingertips. But Ju Hyuk's voice sliced through the temptation like ice. No. His resolve was unbreakable. Give him the path of a commoner, or he would walk away forever. Guang Il was paralyzed by the rejection. Why abandon a throne of glory? Ju Hyuk's eyes darkened with profound dread. The spotlight was a lethal poison to him. Fame birthed expectations. Expectations birthed suffocating pressure. It was a burden that would crush his very soul. The evaluators finally understood the depths of his isolation. He was an extreme introvert, terrified of the sun. The thrill of the climb was a fleeting joy. He was merely at the gates of the 11th realm. The abyss ahead was too volatile to wager his freedom. Guang Il read the unyielding terror in the boy's eyes. Pushing further would shatter the fragile bond. He wisely withdrew his fangs. The golden chains were swapped for rusted iron. A standard, unremarkable contract was finally agreed upon. Fools would spit on his cowardly choice. They would demand he seize the crown and conquer the heavens, to bask in the endless riches and glory. But Ju Hyuk knew the ancient truth of the elite path. Infinite power demanded infinite sacrifice. The blood debt would eventually catch up to him. Vanguard hunters were slaves to the ascent. Surrender was never an option. They were doomed to clash against uncharted nightmares until death. Ju Hyuk refused to wear those majestic shackles. He only sought a quiet, comfortable corner of the world. Just enough gold to survive in absolute peace. Deep within the Seoul Hanamdong Awakening Management Bureau, Director Park crushed the documents in his fist. The final intelligence contradicted the preliminary whispers. A storm of confusion brewed in the command center. Guang Il's voice echoed through the encrypted channel. He described a pathetic soul completely devoid of ambition. The director demanded the absolute truth. Was this trembling coward truly the S+ anomaly? The confirmation struck like thunder. The director's brilliant mind spiraled into chaos. The boy was a walking contradiction. His cowardice was of a legendary, almost mythical tier. The director desperately grasped at logic. Had they tracked the wrong shadow? Mina's voice cut through the static, cold and absolute. There was zero margin for error. The identity was flawless. The timestamps of destiny aligned perfectly. The director's eyes blazed with tyrannical greed. Fear was a trivial flaw before absolute supremacy. Talent of this he issued a terrifying decree. Drag that boy into the elite squad no matter the cost. Guang Il bowed to the ruthless command. The hunt was back on. Elsewhere, Ju Hyuk's blood boiled with quiet fury. The grand deception had crumbled. He unleashed his wrath upon the giant knight. But his fake rage drained his pathetic stamina. One more reckless victory, he vowed, and his summon would face oblivion. The gates of the 12th purgatory ground open. The Black Tower of Korea welcomed its reluctant king. The system declared a new trial of blood. Exterminate 20 ice snow icicle spear weasels. The 3-hour countdown of destiny began anew. The colossal shadow of Jon emerged once more. Ju Hyuk burned the command into the knight's soul. Restrain your divine might. The summon offered a gentle, pleasant vow of obedience. Ju Hyuk desperately prayed for mediocrity. If he could just fade into the background of average hunters, the hounds of the Bureau would finally abandon his scent. A biting frost gnawed at his bones. He had braced himself for the chill. Yet, this realm was an absolute zero hellscape. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to endure. But his pale face betrayed him. Jon caught sight of his fading color. Panic flashed in the summon's eyes. He immediately demanded to know if his master was unharmed. The main character dismissed it as a mere draft, but Jon was already moving. He vowed to slaughter every beast in sight. He would carve a path to a warm sanctuary. The main character opened his mouth to tell him to slow down, to take their time, but his words fell on empty air. Jon had already vanished like a phantom. To the overprotective warrior, a simple cold was a death sentence, an incurable plague that could claim his master's life. In Jon's mind, the absolute worst-case scenario had already begun. His master was in mortal peril. Driven by absolute terror, Jon became a god of death. He reaped the monsters' lives with terrifying speed. Blood rained down in swift, merciless strikes. Suddenly, a system alert shattered the silence. A reward for claiming 15 platinum badges. A transcendent perk had been granted. The energy shield kit materialized within his tower inventory. Without a second thought, the main character equipped the metallic band. It clamped onto his wrist with a heavy, satisfying click. This was no ordinary trinket. It was a lifesaver, a barrier designed to swallow incoming devastation whole. But absolute defense came with a price. Once its threshold was shattered, the shield would vanish. It demanded a 5-hour slumber to recharge. Yet, its power would grow alongside his own level. A shimmering force field slowly wrapped around his body. It felt as impenetrable as a legendary suit of armor. Even better, it lacked a tower-exclusive restriction. This absolute defense could manifest in the real world. A capitalist thought breached his mind. What was the market value of such absolute protection? He ran the numbers in his head. An artifact of this caliber? It could easily command 2 to 3 billion won. Temptation whispered in his ear. He could liquidate it now. He could abandon this blood-soaked tower forever and live like a king. But the grander truth anchored him. If the 15th floor offered this much wealth, what divine treasures awaited at the summit? Ambition blazed within him. He turned to Jon with burning eyes. Could they obliterate the 16th floor and claim an S+ rank right away? Jon's response was chillingly pragmatic. Victory was certain, but absolute perfection was not. An S+ rank could not be guaranteed. Juyak felt his soaring hopes violently crash. Indecision paralyzed him. The path forward was suddenly shrouded in lethal uncertainty. Beside him, Jon calmly crunched on a cookie, oblivious to the inner turmoil. The loyal summon tilted his head, questioning his master's distress. The dark thought of selling the bracelet crept back into Juak's mind. Far beyond the tower's reach, a storm was brewing. Director Park paced the floor, consumed by a gnawing dread. The world had gone silent. The glorious global announcements for S+ clears had vanished. Mina's voice cut through the heavy air. 15 agonizing days had passed. Gwang Il stepped forward with grim intelligence. The records had been verified. The divine anomaly was currently trapped on the 15th floor. A volcanic rage erupted from Director Park. His fist slammed against the desk in sheer frustration. He cursed the heavens for their cruel irony. Why bestow such godlike potential upon a coward? It was a tragic waste of a legendary destiny. Gwang Il kept his composure like a seasoned tactician. He acknowledged the lethal spike in difficulty awaiting on the 16th floor. Yet, he refused to believe Juyak had surrendered to fear. He urged patience. Though they needed to hold the line. Suddenly, his device vibrated with a sharp chime. A transmission had arrived. The sender was Juyak himself. The message was short and decisive. He was descending upon the Awakener Management Administration. He demanded access to the exclusive player shop. In that singular heartbeat, the absolute truth struck Director Park like a physical blow. The prodigy was not cowering in fear. He was executing a calculated grind. He was harvesting the 15th floor to amass an absolute fortune for war gear. Gwang Il's eyes widened in profound realization. The puzzle pieces violently snapped together. During their initial visit, the awakened rookie had possessed nothing. He had faced the abyss with entirely bare hands. Crushing shame washed over the director. He realized how utterly foolish he had been to mock a genius tactician. He issued a swift and absolute command. When the young king arrived, the armory's gates must be thrown wide open. Every legendary artifact would be offered to him at a catastrophic loss. A magnificent giveaway price was mandated. The director silently cursed his blind arrogance from 15 days ago. Back within the tower, a different crisis unfolded. Jon's face drained of all color. Cold sweat cascaded down his hardened features. His master had issued an unthinkable command. Juyak demanded to be pierced by his summon's own blade. To Jon, this request was a psychological torment far worse than death. The loyal shadow fell to his knees in pure agony. He begged his master to beat him to death instead. If he was unhappy, a brutal execution was better than this madness. Juyak sighed heavily at the dramatic display. He calmly explained his lethal experiment. He merely needed to test the absolute defense of his new barrier. It was a simple combat trial, not a suicidal decree. He was baffled by his subordinate's overwhelming despair over a mere flesh wound. But Jon turned his head away, completely shutting down. Frustration flared within the main character's chest. If his blade would not strike, he would do the bloody deed himself. He seized Jon's trembling wrist with an iron grip. He violently yanked the razor-sharp edge toward his own flesh. Jon's eyes widened in catastrophic shock. Crimson blood instantly bloomed across Yuak's skin. A chilling realization struck the master. He had forgotten to channel his aura into the shield. Pure pandemonium erupted. Jon shrieked in absolute horror, demanding his own cursed arm be severed as penance. Thankfully, a miraculous healing light enveloped the wound. The innate regeneration stitched the torn flesh back together. The traumatized summon pleaded for an end to such terrifying recklessness. Yuak agreed without hesitation. He ordered his shadow back to the battlefield. Like a bolt of dark lightning, Jon dashed off into the dense canopy. He carved through the climbing abominations with lethal precision. Yuak calculated the massacre's duration. It would be over in 10 short minutes. Time was a luxury in the tower. He decided to temper his own deadly arts while he waited. He ignited the shadow step technique. The result stole the very breath from his lungs. He tore through the space so violently that phantom afterimages trailed his path. His own godlike velocity sent a tremor through his soul. The true essence of this power finally clicked into place. Jon's tactical wisdom became blindingly clear. This supreme mobility was an absolute lifesaver. It was the ultimate maneuver for a tactical retreat. But before he could revel in his newfound mastery, a chilling presence broke his focus. A sinister shadow lurked nearby. A vile goblin. The wretched beast was dragging itself through the dirt. It had cowardly evaded the Reaper's scythe, only to set its sights on easier prey. With a blood-curdling screech, it launched a desperate, lethal ambush against him. Yuak instantly flared his divine aura. The absolute barrier materialized just in time. The goblin's razor teeth clashed against impenetrable energy instead of tearing his arm from the bone. Disgust washed over him like a foul wind. With a devastating kick, he sent the vile creature hurtling through the air. It became a living projectile, rocketing directly into Jon's path. The Shadow Warrior bisected the monster with one flawless stroke. He opened his mouth to make a lighthearted quip about the brutal soccer assist. But then, the words died in his throat. The horrifying truth dawned on the loyal knight. His liege had been thrust into mortal combat. He crossed the battlefield in a heartbeat, his eyes wide with frantic dread. He desperately scanned his master's form. An avalanche of frantic questions spilled from his lips. Had he truly fought the goblin? Was his precious life force draining away? He conducted a bizarrely thorough inspection, even sniffing for the scent of blood. Only after confirming his master's absolute safety did the tension break. But the relief quickly morphed into a fierce, protective lecture. He reprimanded the young king for his foolish bravado. The battlefield was no place for reckless arrogance. The relentless scolding echoed painfully in Huok's ears. He offered a hollow promise of future caution just to silence the tirade. 15 grueling days of bloodshed on this cursed floor had forged him anew. His combat arts now flowed like second nature. The spoils of war were impossibly heavy. 22.5 kilograms of condensed magical essence weighed down his inventory. A staggering treasure trove valued at over 11,250,000 won. Team leader Guang Il's voice echoed through the receiver. Juak issued his command to raid the exclusive player shop. Guang Il immediately pledged to dispatch a royal escort to his sanctuary. The lone wolf insisted on walking his own path, but Guang Il fiercely rejected the idea. This was a non-negotiable privilege for their most vital contracted players. Resigned to his fate, the young king awaited his chariot. A sleek, armored luxury beast arrived, whisking him away to the center of power. The heavy doors swung open, revealing team leader Guang Il standing at attention. His greeting was laced with absolute reverence. The entire facility seemed to bow to Yuak's presence. He was no longer a mere hunter. He was an absolute VIP, a titan walking among mortals. They penetrated the fortress-like administration building. His biometric vein data was seamlessly engraved into the central mainframe. The unbreakable gates of the armory were now his to command, day or night. Guang Il eagerly offered to guide him through the halls of power, but Yuak firmly declined. He desired solitude in this sanctuary of weapons. He strode toward the exclusive player shop with quiet authority. The sprawling facility was a marvel of opulence. Yet, it was a ghost town, devoid of any other souls. A grim thought crossed his mind. Were these legendary artifacts priced entirely beyond reach? His immediate priority was liquidating his blood-soaked spoils. The colossal sum of 11,250,000 won was locked in. The massive wealth would strike his accounts within 3 rotations of the sun. He demanded immediate purchasing power using the pending fortune. The administration bowed to his absolute authority without hesitation. The crushing weight of the tower's fatigue began to set in. He resolved to seize his vital gear and retreat to his sanctuary. Meanwhile, in a shadowed office, the highest authority watched closely. Director Park demanded a status report on their prized prodigy's shopping spree. Gwang-il delivered the tactical update with absolute precision. The young king was inspecting the armory. To ensure absolute peace, all other awakened forces had been barred from entry. The director's gaze sharpened as he interrogated the execution of their financial strategy. A catastrophic slash in prices had been enforced, a legendary 90% discount across the board. Outright charity might shatter the pride of their supposedly timid hero. They had to maintain the illusion of a transaction. A wicked grin spread across Director Park's face. The manipulation was flawless. Deep within his sanctuary, Huach unveiled his new arsenal. The adamant mace gleamed with a deadly, unbreakable aura. It was a steel at a mere 2 million won. Beside it lay the basilisk leather walkers, radiating ancient power. A legendary defense secured for just 3 million won. He knew the dark reality of the awakened market. Relics of this caliber demanded 20 to 30 million won just to start the bidding. The sheer weight of team leader Gwang-il's VIP treatment was impossible to ignore. It was a monumental favor, and heavy favors always carried a burdensome price. Yet, the raw power radiating from the dark leather was utterly intoxicating. A tempest of conflicting emotions raged within his heart. He was effectively unarmored, trusting his entire survival to mere footwear. But this absolute arrogance was only possible because of his impenetrable energy shield. It was a god-tier absolute defense that rendered all other plating obsolete. A divine blessing bestowed upon him by a mere system perk. He had sworn a blood oath to maintain his humility within the tower's treacherous grasp. But this supreme power whispered to him in the dark. It was a demonic temptation impossible to resist. The intoxicating taste of invincibility was slowly corrupting his soul. The next dawn broke, and the ritual of summoning commenced. Jon materialized from the shadows, executing a flawless military salute. The loyal knight questioned if they were doomed to repeat the 15th floor's endless slaughter. But his master's voice was cold and resolute. The gates of the 16th floor awaited their wrath. The cosmic cooldown had finally shattered. A new slot for a divine entity had opened. As the arcane runes flared to life, Yuach closed his eyes and prayed to the heavens with all his might. An ominous violet aura erupted, twisting reality itself. But the sheer catastrophic scale of the manifestation defied all logic. The colossal entity materialized with a deafening crash, its monstrous head instantly obliterating the sanctuary's ceiling. The young king's blood ran ice cold. He stood completely paralyzed beneath the shadow of a true nightmare. His eyes widened in absolute terror. Cold sweat drenched his face. Shock paralyzed his senses. What manner of beast had he just called forth? Yet, amidst the creeping dread, a mundane sorrow pierced his mind. His security deposit was completely gone. Shattered concrete meant shattered finances. Through the dust, colossal limbs materialized. A gargantuan figure stood before them. The summoner froze. Was this a man or a monster? Annoyance flashed in Jon's eyes. The assassin delivered a brutal kick, roaring at the giant to kneel. The strike connected dead center with the titan's face. Jon unleashed a flurry of blows. Fury laced his words. Of all the souls in existence, why this wretched fool? The assassin spat venom, claiming this giant was a plague upon his life. He wanted him dead. The summoner watched in stunned silence. Did these two share a history? The behemoth simply groaned in annoyance. The blows meant nothing to him. They were mere tickles against his iron skin. Murderous intent exploded from Jon. He dared the giant to speak another word. The assassin promised to sever his throat and decorate the corpse. The summoner finally intervened. The tension had to break. One ruined ceiling was destruction enough. At his master's command, Jon yielded instantly. The summoner ordered him back. It was time to face this new companion. Jon scoffed at the effort. Words were wasted on this beast. In their realm, the giant's infamy was legendary. He was known solely for his profound stupidity. The assassin sneered. He doubted the brute even grasped the 3 sacred laws of summoning. The titan grumbled in defense. He claimed the laws were etched in his mind. Jon challenged him to prove it. The giant spoke with heavy breaths. Article 1 demanded absolute loyalty to the master. Article 2 required a deep understanding of one's worth. But then, silence fell. Article 3 was lost to his hollow mind. Jon's twisted smile returned. His point was flawlessly proven. The assassin offered a dark solution. Slaughter the fool now, and banish him to the void for 100 days. The Colossus clutched his head in painful confusion. The summoner stood bewildered by such a ruthless penalty. Suddenly, the system interface illuminated the darkness. The brutal truth was revealed. This was the dim-witted, savage meat shield of the Great Plains tribe. His true name was lost to time. His grade was merely rare. A human savage warrior, bound to this realm for 10 fleeting hours. A 3-hour void awaited him between calls. Right now, his loyalty and satisfaction stood at absolute zero. Bitter disappointment washed over the summoner. And rank was the absolute bottom of the abyss. Should he endure a grueling month before seeking another ally? He looked at the towering figure. He asked for a name. The giant slowly shook his head. His own identity was forgotten. The master pressed further. Did he know this realm? The giant knew nothing. The Black Tower meant absolutely zero to him. Frustration gnawed at the summoner's core. Seeking answers, he dove deep into the giant's hidden system specifications. Then, the world violently shifted. The sync initiated. The summoner was dragged into the abyss of the giant's memories. A boundless emerald plain materialized. In this forgotten past, the towering savage sat in perfect peace. He was gently playing with golden butterflies. He was a child of the Great Plains, a soul entirely untainted by malice. True joy flowed from the earth itself. Yet beneath this fragile innocence lay godlike physical power. Vicious dire wolves lunged to tear his throat. He merely smiled, thinking it was a game. With a playful pat, he shattered their skulls. His terrifying strength betrayed his gentle mind. Eventually, a shadowy figure approached. A man who sought to exploit the rumors. The legends of the unbreakable behemoth were entirely real. The sheer mass of the giant defied reality. The stranger called himself Eros. He demanded the warrior's name. But the gentle giant only offered a blank stare. The concept of a name had already slipped from his grasp. A venomous deception took root. The false hero manipulated the pure soul. The giant was cast into the abyss as a living fortress. His foe was the apocalyptic Hydra. He weathered its corrosive breath with bare flesh. He ripped its serpentine heads from their necks, completely ignoring his own melting skin. His singular, desperate will was to shield his allies, but the relentless acid storm claimed its toll. His indestructible body dissolved into agony. As the light faded from his eyes, the truth was revealed. His so-called comrades stood over his melting corpse, laughing at his foolish sacrifice. The vision shattered. The tragic origin of the meat shield was painfully clear. Hot tears streamed down the summoner's face. The cruelty of the world was unforgivable. Intelligence meant nothing in the face of such a pure soul. The master extended a trembling hand, welcoming the giant into his life. A vow was struck. They would conquer the deadly tower together. The Titan reached out in return. His massive hand eclipsed the summoner's entirely. The master could only grip a single, colossal finger. A new life demanded a new name. He offered 2 choices, Yaoman or Gobang. Confusion clouded the giant's eyes. Choices were too complex for his mind. The master smiled gently, urging him to claim his own destiny. The booming voice chose Gobang. In that moment, an oath was forged in iron. The summoner swore to protect this giant's happiness. Did the Titan trust his new master? Gobang's answer was absolute. His loyalty was an unbreakable fortress. He would follow his master into the depths of hell. The summoner turned to the shadows. He locked eyes with Jon. They were a trinity now. Blood and survival bound them together. Disgust warped the assassin's face. Yet, a venomous calculation brewed in his mind. A sinister strategy took form. Jon acknowledged the brute's worth as a disposable wall of flesh. He promised to forge this dim-witted savage into a weapon of mass destruction. The pact was sealed. The 16th floor of despair awaited their arrival. Gobang's thunderous voice roared in agreement. A second later, Jon's boot slammed into the giant. The assassin demanded instant, terrifying perfection. Delay was a sin. Gobang clumsily mimicked the assassin's harsh tone. The mockery ignited Jon's blazing rage. The fellowship was an absolute nightmare. A hesitant summoner, a bloodthirsty, deranged killer, a colossal, mindless shield. Fate had woven a tapestry of guaranteed disaster. The obsidian gates of the 16th floor opened. The Korean Black Tower swallowed them whole. Surging energy forcibly adjusted their physical limits. Dormant traits awakened from slumber. Deadly combat skills unlocked, ready to unleash devastation. The summoner steeled his trembling heart. Survival was the only option. The system issued a bloody mandate. Slaughter 30 goblin scouts before 5 hours evaporated. Jon barked orders through the darkness. Ignite the energy shield immediately. Prime the shadow step for a desperate escape. The enemy lurked in the unseen shadows. Their toxic needles brought swift, agonizing death. The ambush could strike from any angle. Suddenly, a deadly projectile whistled through the air, aimed directly at the master. In a flash of lethal grace, Jon snatched the venomous dart mid-flight. The trap was sprung. An avalanche of lethal strikes rained upon them. The summoner dove behind a jagged boulder, his heart pounding like a war drum. Jon moved like a phantom, deflecting the lethal storm. The relentless barrage of poison tore through the air. The stone barricade began to fracture under the overwhelming assault. The master's mind calculated the dread. Over 50 assassins lurked in the canopy. He screamed the command. "Go Bong, seize the vanguard!" The giant's aura instantly darkened. Playtime was utterly over. His massive boots slammed forward, fracturing the very earth beneath him. The behemoth launched himself into the heavens. Jon watched in sheer bewilderment as panic seized the goblin horde. A total eclipse blotted out the light. An apocalyptic shadow descended. Gobang crashed into the earth like a falling meteor. A devastating shockwave pulverized everything in its path, instantly obliterating the front line. The terrifying impact launched even the assassin into the air. The summoner stared in absolute awe. This was not a battle. It was an outright massacre of overwhelming mass. Desperate, the surviving goblins unleashed a venomous volley. The deadly needles simply bounced off Gobang's titanic flesh. True to his master's command, the giant executed a flawless slaughter. The summoner's mind reeled in disbelief. How could this monster be classified as a mere rank? His destructive force was catastrophic. In the theater of war, he moved like an SSR tier legend. The truth finally dawned on the master. His tragic intellect was the only chain holding back his rank. The battlefield faded to the warmth of home. A feast of fried chicken awaited them. Gobang devoured the meal with pure ecstasy. The summoner smiled, showering his indestructible vanguard with praise and endless food. A swift strike interrupted the feast. Jon ordered the beast to show some restraint. The master sighed, praying for a miracle of harmony. The assassin arrogantly claimed his share, but the spice was a hidden trap. Infernal heat erupted in Jon's mouth. The legendary killer was defeated by seasoned poultry. The summoner couldn't hold back his laughter. A master of death, brought to his knees by spicy heat. How utterly pathetic. Amidst the chaos, a gentle rumble filled the room. Gobang declared his master to be a truly noble soul. The innocent words pierced the summoner's defenses. The titan spoke with absolute sincerity. The master provided the divine kitchen that sustained his life. A faint warmth colored the summoner's cheeks. His heart swelled with emotion. Such a small offering paled against the giant's devastating loyalty. In truth, the master was the one leaning on this unbreakable pillar. Violence shattered the tender moment. Jon's fist hammered into the giant's thick skull. He viciously corrected the mispronunciation. "It was chicken, you fool!" The master flinched at the brutal impact. Anger flared in his eyes. He fiercely commanded the assassin to halt his endless torment. A hollow apology slipped from Jon's lips. The beast required harsh discipline, he claimed, yet hidden jealousy burned within the assassin's heart. The giant was secretly devouring their rations. Dawn broke. The shadows deepened. The grim gates of the 17th floor awaited their challenge. The dimensional pressure instantly recalibrated their forms. Suppressed traits roared back to life. Lethal combat arts unlocked with devastating potential. Level 17 had been achieved. Raw, unbridled power coursed fiercely through the summoner's veins. The energy threatened to consume his sanity. His heart thundered like a trapped beast demanding release. Bloodlust painted his vision red. He was desperate to clash blades, but Jon's chilling voice cut through the haze. Arrogance was a disease born near level 20. The assassin stepped forward, seizing the vanguard position. The colossal titan moved like an iron mountain to block the path. His oath was absolute. He ordered his master to retreat to safety. Survive at all costs. Humbled by his guardians, the summoner swallowed his burning pride. He accepted his place in the shadows. The grim mandate of the 17th floor materialized. Annihilate 30 elite goblin warriors. Digital guides and empty theories were utterly useless here. The sheer, suffocating pressure of their presence was beyond terrifying. Reality was far more brutal than fiction. A legion of death stood before them. Over 90 battle-hardened veterans formed a ruthless battalion. These were no mindless beasts. They were masters of slaughter and military precision. The summoner's mind frantically recalled the optimal survival strategy. Retreat to the sanctuary was the first mandatory step. Patience was their only weapon. Wait for the horde to splinter into vulnerable hunting parties of 3. Move like ghosts. Draw them into the abyss. Slaughter them in absolute silence. Repeat this bloody cycle until the grim quota is finally paid in full. Time was a luxury. Jon Kasac refused to waste it on slow tactics. He issued a single command. Move! Gobang unleashed an earth-shattering roar. Raw power erupted through the giant's veins. With this behemoth at his side, victory was certain. Even the 20th floor would be child's play. Jon Kasac pointed forward. He ordered total annihilation. His blood rushed at the thought of his next divine perk. The order was given. Gobang launched forward like a siege weapon. The goblin general shrieked in panic. Shields locked into a desperate defensive formation. A rain of spears struck the giant. They shattered instantly against his iron-like flesh. Impact! Gobang obliterated their front line. Goblins flew like broken dolls. They smashed brutally into the cold earth. Jon Kasac watched in absolute awe. The giant's raw destruction was magnificent. Tactics only mattered against equals. This was not a battle, it was a massacre. Throwing these goblins at Gobang was like throwing pebbles at a fortress wall. Suddenly, a blue light flashed. The system awakened. An S+ clear had been achieved. The 17th floor of Korea's Black Tower was conquered. A radiant platinum badge materialized. Jon Kasac smiled at the glorious reward. Yet, from the shadows, John watched. Surprise mixed with a bitter taste of disappointment. The 18th floor awaited. Their new prey, goblin assassins. Jon Kasac unleashed his giant once more. Gobang charged into the dark forest, but these enemies were different. They moved unseen in the suffocating shadows. The assassins froze in utter terror. Gobang uprooted massive trees with bare hands. He crushed hidden foes by pure accident. The giant grunted in annoyance. The stealth magic blinded his strikes. The tension spiked. Jon Kasac instantly grasped the grim reality. Brute force alone would not conquer this realm. Gobang roared into the darkness, demanding them to show themselves. Suddenly, chilling laughter pierced the silent forest. It was John. The Shadow Knight stepped forward. He mocked his master's clumsy meat shield tactics. He promised to show them true, refined slaughter. The goblin's stealth was pathetic against his abyss-born speed. He invoked Shadow Step. In a single breath, heads rolled into the dirt. The death toll skyrocketed. Jon Kasac watched the carnage with cold satisfaction. This was his grand design all along. He knew the truth. John had been burning with fierce jealousy ever since the giant's arrival. The master manipulator had struck again. Igniting their fierce rivalry was entirely intentional. The trap had snapped shut flawlessly. Now his shadows fought ruthlessly for his favor. They would reap endless badges for their lord. The hunger for power consumed him. He needed stronger perks. Level 18 was finally within his grasp. The moment of truth had arrived. He had to unleash his own dormant might. He had memorized every lethal detail of this floor's strategy. Their stealth magic was laughably weak. A sharpened mind could easily track their vile presence. Fear had no place in his heart. He had forged his own shadow step through endless bloodshed on the 15th floor. He melted into the shadows behind an assassin. The kill was guaranteed, but his mortal body betrayed him. His ankle buckled under the strain. He pitched forward wildly. By sheer, absurd luck, his blade buried itself deep into the goblin's skull. The system registered the brutal kill. He exhaled a shaky breath of relief. He tried to play it cool, but the battlefield offered no mercy. A second assassin materialized from the abyss. A lethal blade swung toward his defenseless back. Across the blood-soaked woods, John danced through his enemies. The kill count surged to 25 out of 30. A swift slash separated another head from its shoulders. Only 3 targets remained. Suddenly, Gobang crashed into the fray. The giant unleashed a devastating whirlwind of destruction, crushing the final 3 beasts. The giant sought to claim more blood. John roared in pure fury, cursing the beast for ruining his flawless hunt. Then, the Shadow Knight froze. His master had vanished. Miles away, Jon Kasac summoned a crackling energy barrier. He desperately retreated from the creeping shadows. Smash! A deadly strike hammered against his skull. The glowing shield shattered the lethal impact. He was entirely surrounded by murderous eyes. Jon Kasac gripped his weapon and sank into a flawless combat stance. Adrenaline flooded his mortal veins. Time itself seemed to bend and warp. The blindingly fast assassins now moved like statues in his eyes. He became the storm. With ruthless precision, he slaughtered them all. The blood settled. The divine system chimed in triumph. An S++ rank was forged in history. The 18th floor of the Black Tower was cleared. A blinding platinum badge descended from the heavens. Jon tore through the forest in sheer panic, hunting for his master. He found his lord standing among the corpses. Juhyuk offered a confident, blood-stained smile. He declared he had claimed the final life. Jon collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by immense relief. Miles away in the mortal realm, the administration erupted. A global alert flashed. The impossible S++ clear had been achieved. Director Park trembled with euphoric joy. Gwang-il watched the golden screens in awe. He declared the mysterious climber an unstoppable god of war. His preparations were nothing short of terrifying, absolute perfection. Park wanted to scream the truth to the heavens. He wanted the world to know Korea's legendary hero was their own. But Gwang-il's eyes darkened with a grim warning. Such reckless words would invite death. Mina nodded gravely. Unmasking the anomaly would unleash catastrophic danger. The director swallowed his burning pride. He was merely overflowing with admiration for the rising star. Juhyuk was no longer a mere human. He was a priceless national treasure. He required a fortress of protection, far beyond the greatest elite guilds. The mortal world trembled at the breaking news. A terrifying storm was ravaging the Black Tower. Following 20 days of dead silence, a miracle had occurred. 18 consecutive S+ clears, the very laws of history had been shattered and rewritten in gold. Experts analyzed the mysterious god-tier climber. They placed his power at a towering level 19. The entire nation was caught in a frenzied hunt for his true identity. In the quiet of their safe house, Jon crushed the remote. The screen died. He released a heavy, burdened sigh. The heavy silence gnawed at Juhyuk. He commanded his shadow to speak his dark thoughts aloud. Jon's eyes were deadly serious. "You are evolving too quickly, my liege." The master's dormant potential was awakening at a terrifying, unnatural pace. Confusion clouded Juhyuk's face. He still saw himself as a talentless weakling. He assumed the shadow was speaking in riddles or jesters' tales. He laughed it off casually. But Jon's gaze remained colder than the grave. This was no laughing matter. That final, lethal shadow step had been terrifyingly perfect. It was a demonic execution that even Jon could never replicate. That unnatural mastery was exactly what terrified the loyal knight. He warned his master with unyielding, dark sincerity. The warning struck like a poisoned blade. The thrill of slaughter breeds arrogance, and arrogance invites the grim reaper. If the master learned to love the battlefield, he would march straight into oblivion. Jon forced him to remember their sacred, binding oath. Survival above all. Escape over glory. Juhyuk nodded solemnly. He swore to suppress his rising battle lust. He would crush his foes slowly, one by one. The knight bowed his head in acceptance. Yet, a chilling omen continued to rot inside Jon's soul. Destiny was a cruel master. Jon knew in his very bones that his lord would eventually trigger a catastrophic disaster. Suddenly, Gobang shattered the heavy tension. The giant laughed cruelly, mocking the Shadow Knight for his pathetic, trembling fear. Jon's killing intent exploded. He viciously slammed his boot into the giant's face. He threatened to boil the brute alive in hellfire. Gobang crashed into the mortal refrigerator. Precious rations exploded across the floor. Juhyuk fell to his knees in utter despair. He ordered his monstrous summons back to the void. The shadows swallowed the warring beasts. Juhyuk stared at the ruined food. The precious meals forged by his mother's hands were destroyed. A heavy sorrow crushed his spirit. Seeking sanctuary from the madness, he resolved to return to his mortal roots the very next dawn. Sunlight pierced the morning mist. He pushed open the familiar door, declaring the return of the prodigal son. His mother's warm voice called out from the hearth. His father's weathered face cracked into a gentle smile. He gently scolded his son for staying away so long. The matriarch fiercely defended her son against the nagging. Juhyuk's eyes fell on his father's frail form. He asked about the old man's aching bones. The father stubbornly tried to rise. Juhyuk instantly commanded him to rest his weary body. The proud veteran brushed off the pain. He refused to rot in bed all day long. The mother ordered them to the dining table. A warm, vital feast awaited them. The old man grumbled about the missing younger sibling. Minhyuk had ventured out for supplies and would return momentarily. A humble feast was laid before them. Mid-bite, a heavy question escaped Juhyuk's lips. Was the family sinking in despair? His mother masked her burden with a brave, iron smile. She swore she would secure a new livelihood before the sunset. The patriarch's voice was stern and unyielding. The son must forge his own destiny, completely free from their heavy chains. They strictly forbade him from sacrificing his wealth for them. The room grew tense. Juhyuk carefully tested the waters. He casually dreamed aloud about becoming an awakened hunter. Bam! The father's hand struck the wooden table. Juhyuk's heart stopped dead. Had his grand, deadly secret been exposed? But the heavy silence broke. The old man erupted into roaring laughter. He mocked the boy's absurd, impossible fantasy. The idea was utterly preposterous. How could a man born of this ordinary bloodline wield divine power? He mercilessly exposed his son's darkest weakness, a grown warrior who still cowered in terror at the sight of household insects. Minhyuk burst through the door, echoing the ruthless mockery. It was the comedy of the century. The mother quickly silenced the mocking hounds. Then, her eyes sharpened like a hawk's. She demanded to know why her eldest son was not chained to his desk today. A desperate lie fell from his lips. He claimed it was a day of rest. The truth of his resignation remained buried in the dark. The mother's instincts flared like a warning beacon. She let the illusion stand. But her voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Never, under penalty of death, entangle his soul with loan sharks. The warning struck a dormant nerve. A suppressed nightmare violently clawed its way back to his mind. The gruesome Smile Cache massacre. He quickly smothered his rising panic and swore absolute innocence. Desperate to shift the deadly focus, he interrogated her about her lost position. A nightmare customer sealed her fate. She arrived to fix a simple water purifier. Yet, the tyrant demanded she scrub their rotting waste and filth. Ratings meant nothing to her anymore. Her pride flared. She struck back with bitter, unyielding words. That fiery defiance cost her the job. His mother possessed a reckless, unbending bravery. Injustice withered before her blazing gaze. That fierce and righteous soul, it was the very beacon that captured his father's heart completely. His father proudly claimed her hand as his ultimate mortal triumph. He was a man of quiet, unassuming nature. A gentle soul. Juhyuk inherited that quiet blood. His brother Minhyuk carried the exact same timid curse. Their lineage bore a fragile yet unbending stubbornness. The brutal tower would only bring them endless despair. He chose the path of absolute silence. His grand awakening would remain a secret. Only when the dust settled would he reveal the truth. Shadows stretched as he exited the towering structure. His younger brother walked close beside him. Juhyuk pressed a thick wad of cash into his hands. Minhyuk stared, questioning the sudden bounty. Juhyuk simply called it a tribute for their aging parents. He commanded his brother to deliver the wealth. He ordered him to guard their parents against the crushing weight of labor. He turned to vanish into the streets. Minhyuk halted him. The boy trembled with unspoken words. Juhyuk assumed the heavy burden of past tuition haunted his brother's mind. The foolish boy lacked the courage for a loud gratitude. Juhyuk laid a heavy, reassuring hand upon his shoulder. A silent oath of brotherly understanding passed between them. The crushing tension instantly drained from Minhyuk's eyes. The dam of silence finally broke. The boy spoke his true, greedy desire. He claimed the tribute for their elders felt utterly hollow. His own pockets remained empty. He brazenly demanded his rightful share of the gold. Irritation flared within Juhyuk's chest. The little parasite tested his patience. He channeled 500,000 won into the boy's account. He delivered a stern warning against foolish waste. Soon after, he arrived at the grand gates. The Hanamdong Soul Awakener Management Administration loomed before him. He had intended to return to his desolate chamber. Yet fate dragged his footsteps to this fortress of power. The sight of his fragile family fueled his inner fire. His resolve forged itself into unbreakable steel. He would conquer this new world the right way. Gwangil had demanded a warning before his arrival, but the die was cast. Juhyuk walked in absolute silence. A grand, fawning reception would only breed unbearable awkwardness. He chose to remain a ghost in the crowd. His phantom energy barrier would no longer suffice. The monstrous beasts of the higher realms hungered for blood. He required a bastion of physical steel. The merchant revealed the crushing cost, 100 million won. The sheer numbers struck him like a physical blow. The artifact radiated a heavy, tyrannical expense. If this was his sole salvation, he was doomed to walk away. The astronomical demand rattled his very core. Facing a female merchant only shattered his fragile confidence. His words broke into pathetic stammers. A sea of awakened souls swarmed the once barren hall. Sensing his despair, she presented a lesser treasure, a compact round buckler, forged from immortal adamant and rare psionium. Its modest size belied its lethal efficiency. It was a featherweight bastion, Despite the lesser tribute required, it possessed the miraculous power of self-restoration. She urged him to wield the legendary metal. He strapped the cold alloy to his arm. A perfect harmony resonated between the shield and his skull-crushing mace. They looked forged in the same demonic crucible. A fierce hunger seized him. He demanded the toll. 40 million won. She stepped forward to finalize the bloodless pact. The vast fortune drained from his vault. The artifact was finally his. Yet, crossing words with the merchant felt deadlier than a goblin ambush. He prepared to vanish into the shadows. Suddenly, a strange voice pierced the veil. A hunter had locked eyes on his fresh, unpolished aura. The stranger claimed the name Choi Hosik, a fellow wanderer of the Deadly Tower. His aggressive approach triggered Juhyuk's silent alarms. Still, he offered his own name to maintain the fragile peace. Hosik claimed this fortress as his daily hunting ground. He masked his probing gaze with false camaraderie. He dared to ask the height of Juhyuk's conquests. The stranger boasted of surviving the brutal trials of the 30s. Juhyuk confessed to lingering in the treacherous teens. A predatory gleam flashed in Hosik's eyes. The scent of weakness filled the air. He painted on a savior's smile. He offered his veteran strength for the brutal ascents to come. Juhyuk's naive heart misread the looming danger. He mistook the venomous charm for radiant kindness. He believed the man was merely a social titan. He calmly replied that his path remained bathed in the blood of easily crushed foes. The predator cast his final bait. He promised his shadow would always be nearby. With a slick farewell, Hosik vanished into the crowd. Juhyuk stood in awe of such fearless charisma. He imagined a man that bold, surely possessed a lover's devotion. A bitter drop of envy poisoned his heart. Night fell like a shroud. Juhyuk summoned his holy status window. The glorious number 19 blazed back at him. The 19th realm of the tower awaited its conqueror. He refused to march blindly into hell. He invoked the ancient pact to summon Jon. The spectral warrior materialized, bowing in gratitude for the master's blessing. Juhyuk triumphantly presented his new, unbreakable aegis. Tears of terror streamed down Jon's spectral face. The sight of defensive iron meant only one thing: approaching doom. He begged his master to avoid the impending slaughter. Juhyuk swore to tread with absolute caution. Jon wept bitterly. His fallen master had spoken those exact, cursed words. Juhyuk declared his own cowardice a weapon of survival. He vowed to flee at the first scent of death. Jon demanded a binding oath. If the abyss stared back, the master must sacrifice his summons and survive. The grave vow was struck. Yet, Jon possessed a cunning survival instinct. If blood had to be paid, he shamelessly offered Gobang to the Reaper instead of himself. The spectral warrior braced for the plunge into chaos. Suddenly, a divine aroma shattered the tension. Juhyuk revealed a feast of colossal dumplings. Jon rejoiced in supreme glory. The master favored him over the miserable Gobang. Jaws parted to devour the feast. But a sinister chill froze the air. Juhyuk chewed in blissful ignorance. Jon's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. He asked if the master had forged any mortal enemies. Juhyuk shook his head. Jon's eyes went dark. A monstrous killing intent was bleeding through the walls. The blood drained from Juhyuk's face. 3 thunderous strikes hammered against the wood. A chilling, familiar voice echoed from the abyss. The predator was checking his trap. He commanded Jon to vanish into the shadows. He ignited his invisible energy barrier. The silence shattered. Hot lead obliterated the iron lock. The door flew open. The intruder stepped into the domain with a mocking grin. Juhyuk's eyes blew wide in absolute horror. The smiling extrovert from the armory stood before him. Hosik cursed the agonizing hunt through the winding streets. Juhyuk demanded a reason for this madness. The predator barked a savage order. He commanded his prey to disarm and submit. Murderous fury erupted from Hosik's lungs. He demanded the magical bracelet. He craved the entire inventory. Refusal meant a skull shattered by merciless lead. Cold steel violently pressed against Juhyuk's trembling forehead. Despair chained Juhyuk's racing heart. This ambush was pure execution. But from the pitch-black void, Jon materialized behind the intruder. The arrogant fool had wandered into a dragon's lair. Hosik spat venomous threats. A twisted joy danced within the predator's darkened soul. Juhyuk played the role of the paralyzed victim perfectly. Hosik celebrated his own dark genius. He believed he had cornered a pathetic lamb. The underworld taught him one truth. Cowards surrendered their wealth at the very scent of violence. He roared for the treasure, promising a brutal bludgeoning. But the phantom warrior moved faster than lightning. Jon swung the heavy hilt of his blade. The metal crashed into the intruder's skull with devastating force. Shock paralyzed the hunter's mind. The phantom strike shattered his reality. He never sensed the silent executioner in the room. He fought the crushing blackness. He clawed for balance, but his mortal legs crumpled like dry twigs. He crashed violently to the floor. Ju Hyuk watched the execution in awe. He bestowed grand praise upon his loyal servant. A heavy breath escaped Ju Hyuk's lungs. The assassin's soul remained in his body. He had feared his phantom might unleash an endless bloodbath. He realized Jon was a tactical master, not a mindless slaughtering beast. The grim truth dawned upon Ju Hyuk's mind. The bleeding fool was a cursed item broker. Vile vultures who slaughtered awakened souls in the mortal realm. They stripped the dead of their magical relics. The bloody rumors were completely true. Gwang Il's warning echoed from the past. The elite guilds promised impenetrable mortal shielding for a reason. Once an awakened warrior exited the tower, their flesh became as fragile as ordinary glass. Without his godly power to summon in the mortal realm, his skull would already be shattered. His absolute, reality-breaking dominance became terrifyingly clear. Meanwhile, Jon began binding the unconscious predator like a grotesque gift. The phantom offered to discard the human filth into the night. Ju Hyuk raised his hand. The mortal law of the police must handle this. Jon pleaded to drag the garbage to an unmarked grave. No blood, no trace. Ju Hyuk declared the mortal authorities the ultimate cleansing blade. Far away, the Grand Director Park gasped at sudden news. The anomalous rookie had breached the armory once more. Gwang Il confessed the ghost had slipped right past his watchful eyes. The director demanded the inventory of his purchases. A single, pathetic round buckler was the answer. Frustration seized the mighty executive. If only the boy pledged his soul to the guild, they would have clad him in mythological armor from crown to heel. He pressed for the truth of the rookie's hidden class. Gwang Il analyzed the armory logs, a crushing mace and an unbreakable shield. The verdict was absolute. The boy was walking the bloody path of a close-quarters juggernaut. The association envisioned a heavily armored knight, a bastion of absolute defense. But Director Park knew the bitter truth. If Ju Hyuk fought in the brutal vanguard, no amount of steel could guarantee his survival. Gwang Il promised to secure premium armor for their rising star. Suddenly, his phone shattered the tense silence. The caller identification flashed ominously. It was the local police. He excused himself with a deep, urgent bow. One sentence from the dispatcher froze the blood in his veins. Gwang Il sprinted to his vehicle. He tore through the city streets like a madman. He bounded up the narrow stairwell, skipping steps in pure desperation. Regret clawed violently at his throat. He should have forced the elite contract on him sooner. A suffocating dread gripped his heart over his player's fate. Meanwhile, flashing sirens illuminated Ju Hyuk's battered apartment. Officers pinned the violent intruder to the cold floor. Ho-sok thrashed like a dying animal. He spat venomous lies, screaming that he was the innocent victim of a twisted kidnapping. Ju Hyuk desperately defended his innocence. But the cold-eyed officers demanded he follow them to the precinct. The system was blind to the truth. A heavy knot of anxiety twisted deep in his gut. The terrifying shadow of a prison cell loomed over him. Then, the door slammed open. Gwang Il stood in the threshold like an avenging fury. Ju Hyuk was trembling, drained of all color, but the treacherous intruder smiled at the new arrival. Ho-seok mistook the manager for his savior. He eagerly poured out his fabricated tale of theft and assault. A thunderous crack echoed through the room. Gwang Il's brutal backhand sent the coward crashing to the floor. Absolute shock shattered the intruder's delusion. Murderous rage radiated from Gwang Il's very soul. This pathetic scum dared to deceive him. He dared to raise a blade against a fellow awakened player. Yet, the bleeding rat still wailed his false innocence. With a voice like glacial ice, Gwang Il stripped him of his player status. Another merciless strike followed. The officers simply watched in stunned silence. Gwang Il ordered them to haul the garbage away. The National Intelligence Service was already en route. The intelligence agency was infamous for their ruthless interrogations. Hearing their dreaded name, Ho-seok's resolve shattered into dust. He wept like a pathetic child. He confessed his blinding greed and begged for his worthless life. Gwang Il stared down with absolute disgust. He knew the man's words were utter garbage. This was not the first parasite he had dealt with. Soon, the agency would tear every dark secret from his mind. He mocked the trembling man, telling him to find legal counsel. Though no lawyer would touch a condemned player, Gwang Il turned to coordinate the extraction. He warned the officers of desperate tower teleportation tactics. A player could never hide forever. They would eventually spawn right back into the waiting handcuffs. The wailing criminal was dragged into the abyss of the night. Kwang-il slowly turned back to the young hero. His aura was still terrifyingly dense. He asked if Ju Hyuk had shed any blood. The young man weakly replied that he was unharmed. Suddenly, the imposing manager folded his body in a deep, 90-degree bow. He swore an unbreakable vow upon his honor. This supreme insult would never be repeated. The time for hesitation had passed. The elite contract was no longer a business transaction. It was an absolute shield to protect their greatest asset. The sun rose on a new day. Jon questioned his master about the nocturnal chaos. A faint smile graced Ju Hyuk's lips. The authorities had secured the rat, all thanks to overwhelming bureaucratic power. The shadow assassin's eyes gleamed with lethal intent. He asked if the trespasser faced public execution. Ju Hyuk shook his head. Jon casually twirled his cursed dagger, seeking the prison's location. Ju Hyuk sternly ordered him to bury his bloodlust. He then channeled his mana, calling forth his heavy enforcer. The massive beast named Gobang roared in pure ecstasy. The system had blessed him with a glorious 5-star rank. He marveled at his newfound celestial power. In that moment, Ju Hyuk realized his colossal subordinate possessed surprising intellect. They breached the 19th floor of the Korean Black Tower. The bloody trial demanded the slaughter of 30 corrupted shamans. Dark incantations echoed through the cavern. Yet, these pathetic spellcasters lacked true destructive power. They hid behind cowardly hexes and fragile bone bindings. They summoned rotting fodder to stall for time. It was a labyrinth of minor annoyances. But Ju Hyuk possessed an unstoppable vanguard. Gobang charged wildly into the vile horde. A storm of black magic rained down upon his monstrous frame. The beast inhaled, expanding his massive chest. A shockwave of pure primal fury erupted from his throat. The sheer magnitude of the roar paralyzed Ju Hyuk. The dark spells shattered against the absolute wall of sound. It was an overwhelming display of brute force. Meanwhile, Jon melted into the absolute darkness. His voice echoed from the void, demanding rapid and total annihilation. The Titan grunted his vicious acknowledgement. The two summons became a dual calamity. Blades danced in the shadows, reaping souls without mercy. Giant fists pulverized flesh and bone into dust. A warrior's instinct ignited within Ju Hyuk's chest. He gripped his weapon, desperate to join the carnage. Before he could take a single step, the Azure System panel flashed. The 19th floor had been completely eradicated. His two monstrous servants exchanged a conspiratorial whisper. Jon cleaned his blade, flashing a wicked, satisfied grin. The bitter truth struck the young master like a physical blow. They had orchestrated a total massacre to keep him out of danger. His own summons were treating him like fragile glass. He had been completely played. The heavens celebrated his flawless victory. The supreme S+ rank materialized before his eyes. A gleaming platinum artifact dropped into his palm. Unfazed by the coddling, he stepped into the hellish 20th floor the very next dawn. This was the dreaded crucible of talent, a legendary choke point that buried countless ambitious souls. Jon's voice dropped to a grim whisper. They had entered a nightmare realm crawling with every vile mutation. Venomous scouts lurked in the canopy above. Elite tacticians commanded the brutal vanguard. Phantom blades materialized from the abyss. Hex weavers chanted death rites beside towering, bloodthirsty behemoths. The assassin offered a rare, chilling warning. This battleground was a graveyard of legends. He casually suggested his master retreat to the absolute rear. A subtle nudge commanded the giant to play his part. Gobang thumped his chest like a war drum. He vowed to turn the entire cavern into a river of blood. The master needed only to watch. The divine decree required the slaughter of 100 mutants and an elite commander within 10 hours. Failure carried the ultimate penalty of absolute oblivion. Ju Hyuk narrowed his eyes at his overly protective servants. They were trying to cage him in safety once more. He refused to be sidelined. Jon directed the giant to become a living target. He would strike from the fatal blind spots. The Titan roared, drawing the ire of 100 monsters. A maelstrom of deadly magic and steel rained down, but Ju Hyuk's pride refused to let him hide. He shattered their careful strategy. He surged forward with explosive, blinding speed. Using the giant's broad back as a launch pad, he vaulted into the stormy sky. Adrenaline coursed through his veins in an intoxicating rush. Jon screamed in sheer panic, begging him to stop. The echoes of a pathetic past flashed in his mind. A lifetime of lowering his gaze and swallowing his voice. A weak boy who couldn't even defend his own toys. Paralyzed by an invisible cage of lifelong fear. The crushing weight of poverty only deepened his isolation. He was a ghost wandering the halls of his youth. Mocking laughter surrounded his lonely existence. A discarded soul forced to eat his bitter meals in complete silence. He was the ultimate background character in his own miserable life, too terrified to shatter the mold of his tragic destiny. The very concept of crossing blades with demonic entities was a laughable fantasy. He lacked the courage to meet his human tormentor's gazes. But these grotesque abominations possessed no human malice. They offered no societal judgment. There was no psychological warfare, only pure, untainted survival. To his awakened eyes, they were mere obstacles waiting to be purged. His absolute focus narrowed to total extermination. Jon's desperate cries fell on deaf ears, a phalanx of poisoned spears thrust toward his heart. Juhyuk became a phantom, bypassing their defenses to strike from behind. His heavy shield shattered bone and crushed mutated skulls. He danced across the battlefield like an angel of death, unleashing his pent-up fury with devastating precision. Jon watched in absolute awe. The young master had perfectly assimilated the legendary Shadow Walk technique. But arrogance breeds fatal mistakes. A barrage of condensed magical artillery slammed toward his blind side. The assassin's desperate warning tore through the chaos. Pure survival instinct forced the energy shield into a defensive guard. The blazing aura barrier was the only thing standing between him and absolute obliteration. The horrifying reality of the death game finally sank in. The illusion of invincibility shattered into a million pieces. A commanding voice ordered him to retreat toward the jagged cliffs. Gobang tore through the earth to intercept the horde. A pack of frenzied hunters hounded the young master's retreat. His lungs burned as his vitality plummeted toward absolute zero. His back violently slammed against an impenetrable wall of stone. Was this the graveyard of his short-lived legend? Icy dread paralyzed his frantic mind. He was trapped in a suffocating cage of despair. The executioners raised their blood-stained blades. Then, a mountain of flesh and muscle eclipsed the sun. Gobang lowered his massive arm like an unbreakable fortress. He ground the pathetic ambushers into a bloody pulp beneath his feet. Jon swept through the remnants, severing heads with elegant cruelty. A rare compliment escaped the assassin's lips as the battlefield fell completely silent. Vile energies surged as the goblin shamans chanted, but Jon moved like a phantom. His blade flashed with lethal precision. Heads rolled off the blood-stained cliff. He scanned the carnage with cold eyes. Over 100 corpses lay at his feet. He thirsted for a true challenge. Something far more terrifying had to emerge. Juhyak stood frozen in absolute awe. Total annihilation achieved in the blink of an eye, yet dread crept down his spine. The overwhelming pressure suffocated him completely. Cold sweat drenched his trembling body. He forced a nervous and desperate smile. The towering presence of Gobang loomed uncomfortably close. He begged the behemoth to step back. Suddenly, the earth shattered under their feet. A deafening roar echoed through the abyss. A colossal monstrosity materialized from the dust. The apex predator of its vile bloodline had arrived. A hobgoblin boss. Jon plunged from the deadly heights without hesitation. A single command pierced the chaos. Gobang roared in absolute obedience. The massive beast charged forward like a siege ram to intercept. Steel clashed with apocalyptic force. Gobang parried the lethal twin blades flawlessly. He forced the monster back with raw, brute strength. A massive hand crushed the creature's throat. A savage grin crossed Jon's face. His vanguard had finally proven its absolute worth. The command rang out to crush its windpipe. Jon descended like an angel of death. His twin daggers pierced the beast's wretched eyes. The monstrous titan collapsed instantly. The massacre was finally complete. 100 goblins slaughtered. 1 elite hobgoblin exterminated. The 20th floor had been completely conquered. A surge of golden light enveloped our hero. He ascended to a new realm of power. The system bestowed its grand spoils. 2 kilograms of raw magic stones. 5 legendary tower healing elixirs. A wicked smirk appeared on Jon's face. He offered a warrior's praise to his master. Juhyak could barely catch his breath. The apex predator had fallen like a mere insect. His path to domination was clear. These 2 divine beasts were his ultimate weapons. He bowed with profound reverence, a heartfelt tribute to their unmatched ferocity in battle. The 2 warriors lowered their heads in fierce loyalty. Suddenly, divine text illuminated the dark sky. An S++ rating achieved. The 20th floor of the Korean Black Tower bowed to his might. The heavens granted a magnificent platinum badge. The gateway to the 21st floor shattered open. Meanwhile, beyond the tower, the mortal realm erupted. Whispers of the legendary S+ clearance spread like wildfire. The world trembled at this impossible feat. Digital networks descended into utter chaos. 2 weeks of silence had bred deep despair. Now, hope ignited a blazing inferno. Mortals furiously debated the limits of this godlike climber. Could they reach the absolute summit? The mythical 30th floor awaited. Rumors painted them as an elite phantom guild, shadows operating entirely beyond human comprehension. Conspiracy theories flooded the mortal channels. Were they hiding from greedy foreign empires? A brutal war for this supreme talent was already brewing. 20 perilous floors annihilated in unbroken succession, a historic monument of absolute domination. Yet, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Such divine glory would invite relentless predators. The burning spotlight was a highly dangerous weapon. Agents scrambled to silence the ravenous media. Director Park crushed the foolish plan instantly. One wrong move would expose their golden goose completely. Absolute secrecy was their ultimate armor. He demanded ruthless intel on the summoner's bloodline. Guangil stepped forward from the shadows. His dark investigation was flawlessly executed. The paternal patriarch had been successfully identified. Bong Juyak was the man's name. A treacherous winter accident had crippled the patriarch. His shattered bones required intense mending. Director Park demanded an imperial intervention. How would they secure his absolute loyalty? Guangil offered the nation's most elite healing sanctuary. The powerful director nodded in grim approval. Next was the younger blood of the family. Bong Juyak stood at the very threshold of manhood. The harsh, mandatory military draft approached rapidly. Orders echoed with unquestionable authority. Manipulate the draft and secure limitless academic funds. Finally, the matriarch entered their crosshairs. Hong Gumja walked a path of bitter hardship. She had recently lost her grueling mortal labor. A venomous clash with a tyrant customer had destroyed her livelihood. Guangil's voice dropped to an ominous whisper. This woman was a terrifying force of nature. She was the true sleeping dragon of the household. She ruled her domain with an iron fist. Her fiery wrath terrified her own kin. Neither patriarch nor prodigy dared to cross her path. Her absolute authority was completely undisputed. A cunning smile crept across the director's face. The path to manipulating the hero was crystal clear. He unleashed the full, terrifying might of the Awakener administration. Failure was absolutely not an option. The grand operation commenced in total secrecy. Far away, a completely different kind of hunger awakened. John's senses flared at an intoxicating aroma. The giant Gobang trembled with ravenous anticipation. Juyak barked a fierce command to freeze. These otherworldly titans had to vanish immediately. A heavy cloak swallowed Gobang's colossal frame. The mortal courier arrived bearing an imperial feast, 12 portions of golden pork and 12 bowls of black noodles. The ignorant mortal chuckled at the mountain of food. He questioned if a massive gathering was underway. Juyak offered a cryptic and highly guarded response. A single offering of fried dumplings was added as tribute. The courier vanished back into the mundane world. Juyak clicked his tongue in silent judgment. Such a microscopic tribute for a king's ransom of food. Not even a single token of future discount was offered. He brushed off the minor insult quickly. Legends did not haggle over petty coupons. He shattered the illusion, holding his warriors back. John deeply inhaled the intoxicating, savory black sauce. A waterfall of drool escaped Gobang's massive jaws. This was a delicacy from realms entirely unknown to him. The Titan completely annihilated a dumpling in one bite. He praised its divine crunch. John recoiled in sheer horror as the beast devoured the ceramic plate too. Juyak commanded his feral troops to feast. A monumental task now demanded his full attention. The mystical inventory materialized before his eyes. 20 platinum badges had finally forged an ultimate key. What godly artifact would descend this time? The system chimed with a blinding celestial light. A legendary mystery box materialized in his grasp. His pulse hammered with unstoppable greed. 3 cosmic treasures from the tower's depths awaited inside. The vast pool of possibilities was staggering. Raw magical stones and 10 exotic botanical herbs, 3 indestructible cosmic metals. Over 50 pelts ripped from abyssal monstrosities. Life-saving potions and mythical elixirs. Divine armaments, impenetrable armor, and ancient relics. Devastating combat arts waiting to be unleashed. Runes capable of forcing 5 instant ascensions. Tickets to shatter the boundaries of 5 entire floors. Hourglasses to reset lethal cooldowns. Runes to evolve a hunter's very soul. Evolutionary catalysts for his loyal vanguard. Passports to conquer foreign dimensional rifts. And tickets to summon legendary beasts up to SSR rank. Juyak gasped heavily at the overwhelming celestial menu. Half of these ancient terms eluded human comprehension. He surrendered to the absolute chaos of fate. Raw elements and base metals were mere garbage. A king required true, world-shattering power. Mortal steel and basic armor completely bored him. Forced ascension runes offered raw but stagnant power. Floor-skipping tickets promised rapid glory. But such shortcuts meant sacrificing ungodly amounts of loot. Raw leveling runes were clearly the superior tactical choice. The foreign tower passport gleamed with dark temptation, a chance to invade and pillage rival nations' realms. But the ultimate holy grail was a supreme summon ticket. An SSR entity would shatter the balance of the world. He could command a god to slaughter his enemies. His violent path to the summit would become a leisurely stroll. Visions of a golden palanquin danced in his greedy mind, absolute domination without lifting a single finger. Hope flared violently in his chest. 3 divine chances to rewrite his destiny. He broke the celestial seal with a desperate prayer. He vowed to walk a path of absolute righteousness for a miracle. The ethereal box spun in a vortex of blinding light. His heart threatened to burst. 10 kilograms of worthless magic stones crashed into his inventory. A crushing wave of bitter disappointment hit him. A pathetic reward he could farm in his sleep. Yet, 5 million won was still a hefty king's ransom. He braced himself and shattered the second seal. The primordial thunderclap staff erupted into existence. The mythical artifact bound itself to his soul instantly. The title radiated the terrifying aura of an ancient martial god. Was this a world rendering offensive art? The profound mysteries could wait for a quieter moment. He shattered the final glowing orb. A summoned entity, rank-up rune manifested. Absolute ecstasy surged through his veins. The ultimate jackpot was finally his. A catalyst to evolve his beasts into absolute gods. This was the supreme treasure he craved most. But a perilous dilemma now blocked his path. Jon possessed an SR rank, while Gobang stood at a lower tier. Honestly, both warriors possessed the intellect of rocks. He swiftly banished those blasphemous thoughts. They were his absolute, unwavering shields. This divine bond only made the choice more agonizing. Jon had bled and feasted by his side since the very beginning, though the colossal Gobang definitely consumed far more rations. The ancient rune promised magnificent exponential evolution. A beast's hidden potential would completely dictate its new godlike tier. The sacred metamorphosis required absolute isolation. The chosen entity would vanish entirely during their rebirth. Their current destructive power was already overwhelming. Jon would receive this divine blessing very soon. But first, the ancient thunder art demanded to be unleashed. The system window gleamed with absolute power. Primordial thunderclap staff, a divine art consisting of 3 legendary forms. It bathed any weapon in apocalyptic lightning. Better yet, it was a growth-type ability, the exact offensive miracle he desperately craved. He accepted the power without hesitation. The first form awakened. Soul-chasing thunderbolt. Ancient knowledge surged through his mortal mind. The mastery of lightning etched itself directly into his brain. He gripped his mace tightly. He swung with all his might, willing the thunder to strike. But the air remained dead and silent. An awkward heaviness settled over the room. Deep down, he already knew the bitter truth. Real-world usage was completely restricted. If awakened beings unleashed such chaos, villains like Jose would have turned human society to ash long ago. He needed the tower's blood-soaked floors to test this power. Later that day, Jon noticed his strange behavior. His loyal summon questioned the sudden practice swings. Juyak revealed the truth of his system reward. A brand new ability had graced his status window. Jon's eyes immediately narrowed with sharp suspicion. He asked if it was an offensive technique. Juyak smiled brightly, proudly declaring it was an evolving power. Jon gasped in pure horror. His food bowl clattered against the cold floor. Gobang instantly snatched the spilled meal, devouring it without hesitation. Furious rage erupted from Jon. That was their absolute last ration. He grabbed the beast, demanding he spit it out. Amidst their fierce bickering, Juyak dismissed them both. The following dawn brought heavy silence. Juyak sat lost in deep contemplation. He completely understood his loyal knight's crippling fear. A summoner's fate was a fragile one. Their summoned beasts held almost all their lethal combat strength. By the laws of this cruel system, summoners stayed hidden. They never bled on the absolute front lines. This was especially true for a supreme anomaly like him, a ruler who could manifest these entities in the real world. He thought of Jon's previous master, a nameless summoner from a shattered parallel dimension. That man possessed unfathomable, overwhelming strength. His power eclipsed Juyak's current limits by miles. Yet, even that mighty warrior had met a gruesome end. That catastrophic failure erased an entire world from existence. Jon's suffocating paranoia was completely justified, but Juyak possessed a warrior's burning pride. He had finally awakened, tasting the intoxicating thrill of absolute dominance. He desperately needed to unleash his newly learned offensive art. The system chains bound them in absolute obedience. He was confident he could force their compliance. Arcane magic violently swirled across the room. He called forth his two mighty vassals. Jon materialized with a face pale as death. A suffocating gloom radiated from his armor. Juyak marveled at the sheer terror consuming his servant after just one day. Jon's voice trembled with absolute dread. He feared this new offensive power would become his master's deadly poison. The knight confessed his dark, lingering anxiety. Even conquering the 20th floor had terrified him. The weak goblin trash had offered a false sense of security. This confession struck Juyak like a physical blow. His faithful guard was truly terrified of him fighting. Jon's voice turned colder than freezing iron. Battling the savage orcs was strictly forbidden. Juyak offered a preemptive, dangerous apology. He warned that he was about to commit a grave offense. He mockingly challenged his loyal guardian. Would Jon dare to restrain his master with a butterfly knot? Jon's eyes flashed with fierce, defiant resolve. He formally invoked the absolute third law of summons. The primordial rules of their existence were unbreakable. The first, absolute commandment. A beast must defend its master's life at all costs. The second absolute commandment. A beast must bow to its master's every word. But when these sacred laws clashed in bloody paradox, survival eclipsed obedience. The master's life always reigned supreme. Without a second thought, Gobang lunged, his massive hands clamped down on Juyak like steel vises. Jon delivered a punishing strike to the beast's skull. He furiously reminded the brute of their secret pact. The restraint was meant for the tower's deadly interior. Their treacherous plan was brilliantly simple. The moment they crossed the chaotic dimensional threshold, Gobang would become an inescapable, living prison. Jon would slaughter every enemy in their path alone. Betrayal washed over Juyak like freezing water. His own shadows had formed a rebellion against him. He loathed using such a forbidden, desperate technique, but he unleashed his ultimate psychological weapon, the devastating puppy dog eyes. He pleaded for a single drop of mercy, promising absolute caution. Jon remained an unyielding wall of distrust. Juyak frantically vowed never to charge blindly into the abyss again. Jon's iron glare pierced right through him. He demanded an oath of absolute certainty. Juyak argued that cowering in the safe zone achieved nothing. He begged for the blood of just one wretched enemy. He promised a slow, methodical, and flawlessly safe execution. A heavy, reluctant growl escaped Jon's throat. But Juak's blazing determination was an unstoppable force. The overprotective knight finally shattered under the pressure. He laid down one absolute, non-negotiable condition. At the first scent of death, he would strike. Juyak accepted the harsh terms without a single blink. They stepped through the ominous, swirling gate. The 21st floor of the Korea Black Tower awaited. A sprawling, sinister forest swallowed their presence. Jon analyzed the approaching enemy with lethal precision. The orcs possessed devastating strength but hollow minds, though they were undeniably sharper than the mindless Gobang. The massive beast immediately roared in furious protest. He claimed his intellect surpassed those green-skinned monsters. Jon silenced the brute with a venomous command. Suddenly, Juyak halted his advance. He demanded 10 rigorous practice strikes before facing real blood. Jon's eyes lit up with fanatic approval. He pushed for 100 flawless repetitions instead. He forced the towering Gobang down into the dirt, offering the beast up as a living, breathing training dummy. Juyak was ordered to strike with lethal intent. A heavy wave of sheer discomfort crashed over the young master. Jon fiercely demanded 10 merciless blows. He proudly declared the beast's flesh was tougher than tempered steel. Even Juak's maximum output wouldn't leave a single bruise. The ultimate, indestructible shield for their master's training. Gobang eagerly pounded his massive chest, roaring that the master's strikes would feel like a gentle breeze. Juyak instantly rejected the absurd proposition. He threatened to dive into the monster horde completely alone. He refused to strike his own loyal vanguard. Besides, the divine martial path was already seared into his soul. Smashing an enemy's skull felt far more natural than hitting a friend. He commanded his shadows to march forward into the abyss. Jon wept tears of profound, agonizing despair. The system window flickered with a blood-red glow. Mission: slaughter 30 forest orcs before 4 hours expired. The thundering footsteps of the savage horde shook the earth. Jon erupted forward like a blinding flash of light. Gobang unleashed a deafening, blood-curdling war cry. The beast shattered the ground, launching himself through the air. He crashed like a meteor, pulverizing the first monstrous target. Meanwhile, Jon danced through the battlefield like a god of death. Heads severed from shoulders in brilliant arcs of crimson. Juyak froze, absolutely paralyzed by their overwhelming velocity. Cold panic gripped his rapidly beating heart. His monsters would annihilate the entire floor before he could swing his weapon. A lone, trembling orc stood completely bypassed. It stared in dumbfounded horror as the slaughter continued. Juyak instantly recognized the golden opportunity. His loyal knight had isolated a sacrifice just for him. He ignited his aura and charged at breathtaking speed. Jon's voice echoed, promising absolute surveillance from the rear. The savage beast locked onto its fragile new prey. It brought down a crude, bone-crushing greatsword. Juyak vanished beneath the fatal arc with terrifying agility. He launched himself skyward, defying gravity itself. The divine art demanded a singular, flawless vertical execution. Blinding golden lightning violently erupted from his core. The primordial thunderclap staff awakened in his hands. He brought the wrath of the heavens down upon the beast's skull. The reinforced steel obliterated flesh and bone without resistance. The terrifying monster was nothing but fragile glass before him. An intoxicating rush of pure euphoria flooded his veins. The massive corpse crashed lifelessly into the dirt. Juyak stood victorious over his freshly slain prey. The absolute ease of the kill left him completely breathless. Drunk on this newfound power, he locked eyes on his next victim. But a massive shadow suddenly blotted out the sun. Gobang brutally crushed the remaining target beneath his foot. Both summons turned and unleashed murderous, overprotective glares. Juyak nervously laughed, playing completely innocent to his promise. The system bells chimed, announcing the 21st floor's total conquest. A golden light of ascension washed over his leveled-up body. The heavens showered him with glorious spoils of war. 2.1 kilograms of pure, radiant magic stones materialized. 5 mythical healing elixirs dropped into his spatial inventory. The system shattered its own impossible limits. An S+ rank etched his name into the tower's legends. Another brilliant platinum badge secured his absolute dominance. Dawn broke, and the blood-soaked trials resumed. They marched into the scorching hell of the new floor. His ruthless guardians permitted him just one pathetic desert orc. The system erupted in blinding, majestic fanfare. An S++ rank conquered the 22nd floor. The cycle of absolute slaughter continued the very next day. Juyak annihilated a single cave orc in the pitch-black abyss. The 23rd floor bowed to his unstoppable S+ legacy. The infernal heat of the volcano orc pushed his limits. Yet, his divine lightning still delivered the decisive, fatal strike. He relentlessly ascended this cursed tower, day by bloody day. With his 2 monstrous vanguards shielding his path, the apocalyptic climb felt like a gentle, triumphant stroll. The system praised him with another S++ victory on the 24th floor. The relentless wheel of time turned once more. The legendary 25th floor finally loomed before them. Slaying single targets was a painfully slow ascent to true godhood, but he needed to forge unshakable trust with his overprotective shadows. His 2 vassals never left each other's side. He desperately lacked a private moment to present his ultimate gift. The time for hesitation had finally come to an end. He resolved to bestow the mythical rune upon his loyal knight. Arcane energy flared as he called his servant forth. Jon materialized, completely bewildered by the sudden spatial tear. They had sworn to rest their weary bones today. Juyak nonchalantly tossed the glowing relic through the air. He smoothly lied, claiming it was mere garbage found in the dirt. The knight caught it, questioning if this was mystical food. Juyak smirked, ordering his shadow to appraise the artifact. The system window flashed, and Jon turned instantly to stone. His eyes widened in absolute, mind-shattering shock. A summoned entity rank-up rune. A legendary treasure capable of breaking a beast's mortal limits. His hands violently trembled around the glowing stone. Juyak smirked, asking if the humble gift pleased him. Jon choked on his words, begging to know if this was real. A single promotion would evolve him to the legendary SSR tier. The sheer magnitude of this blessing shook him to his very core. Unfathomable power meant a flawless, impenetrable shield for his master. Radiant, unstoppable joy erupted across the knight's scarred face. Seeing his loyal vanguard, this happy warmed Juak's cold heart. He casually asked if they should begin the glorious ascension right now. Jon's warrior instincts immediately suppressed his wild excitement. Forcing an evolution in the open was practically suicide. Juyak instantly understood the sheer gravity of a rank-up ritual. The knight bowed deeply, requesting a tactical retreat. He needed absolute sanctuary to transcend his mortal limits in peace. He vowed to return in a newly forged vessel. Juyak, unsettled by his sudden departure, offered him sanctuary. Jon accepted the offer. He settled in to observe the mortal broadcast. He demanded the channel for the ancient reruns. Juyak countered with video on demand. Jon scoffed at this mortal obsession with hoarding coins, but as the channels flickered, a single image froze Juyuk's blood. "Halt!" Juyak commanded. Jon sensed the sudden shift in aura. "Reverse it!" Juyak growled. The images flashed backward. Then she appeared, his mother. Juyak stopped breathing. Why was she on the national broadcast? She stood like a lone warrior before a corporate fortress. Her battle standard was a heavy placard. It demanded justice for terminated contracts. It cried out for the rights of the workers. "End corporate tyranny," the sign screamed. A raging fire burned within her soul. She refused to bow to an unjust exile. An arrogant elite had demanded degrading labor. She was there to maintain machines, not to act as a servant. Such demands violated her sacred pride. Yet, her masters commanded her to kneel. They demanded an apology to the tyrant. She stood her ground. She possessed absolute innocence. Because she refused to shatter her pride, they severed her livelihood without mercy. For over 10 days, she waged a solitary war. Her only reward? The venomous laughter of corporate lords. They mocked her desperate crusade as mere theatrics. One more laugh, and she would unleash her wrath upon them. Her fury threatened to scorch the earth. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. A stranger approached the battlefield. She braced for another barrage of corporate poison. Instead, a serene smile greeted her. He acknowledged the heavy burden she carried. He spoke a name that carried immense weight. Changshuk, an elite spellcaster of the law from Park and Kim. That legendary name struck like lightning. Her aura spiked with volatile defense. Was this an assassin sent by the corporation? She prepared for a brutal legal strike. "Unleash your worst," she challenged. She would not yield a single inch. The attorney simply lowered his hands in peace. His presence carried no hostility. He declared himself a sword for her cause. He proposed an all-out war against Jinspiring Water Corporation. He offered his crest of allegiance. Park and Kim stood at the pinnacle of the Republic of Korea, and they pledged their supreme power to her, for absolutely zero cost. He knew of her solitary strike at the labor office. Whispers of her struggle had reached his high tower. He swore upon his honor he brought no deception. Yet, her shield of mistrust remained raised. He claimed this was their annual rite of charity, a mission to protect the defenseless. His words carried the stench of hidden motives, but his eyes revealed no falsehood. She stood at the crossroads of destiny. He urged her to accept this sudden grace, a reward for her grueling survival. He vowed to wager the firm's legendary honor on her absolute victory. It was a gamble of life and death. She placed her fate in his hands. The attorney's eyes gleamed at her iron will. He drew his first weapon. They would summon the media hound. In a flash, a swarm of journalists descended like vultures. He commanded her to ignore the ticking clock. She must unleash every agonizing detail. Every drop of corporate venom must be brought to light. They would lay bare the beast's rotting core to the world. She nodded, resolve hardening like steel. Far away, darkness consumed Juhyuk's heart. His mother had been bleeding on a solitary battlefield. She had faced the Titans completely alone. What was the point of possessing two sons? They were nothing but pathetic, powerless burdens. Shadows who failed to protect her in her darkest hour. A chilling question pierced his mind. How did she summon such a majestic legal titan? Park and Kim devoured mountains of gold just to speak. Beside him, Jon's killing intent flared. Should he annihilate the Jinspring Water Company? The assassin's blades hummed with lethal energy. Juhyuk felt the weight of Jon's deadly loyalty. The bloodlust was a comforting warmth. But Juhyuk commanded him to sheathe the steel. The broadcast revealed an impenetrable defense around her. A supreme legal guardian stood at her side. Jon's murderous aura deflated in disappointment. He had sought to present their severed heads as a tribute. Juhyuk resolved to unleash his own treasury. 21 kilograms of arcane mana stones, a fortune equating to 10 million won. If that proved insufficient, the legendary energy shield kit would be sacrificed next. A sudden transmission shattered his thoughts. His father's voice echoed through the device. Had he witnessed the public declaration? Juhyuk confirmed. But his father delivered a shocking revelation. The titanic legal fees were entirely voided. Juhyuk's mind reeled from the impact. His war chest was already primed for deployment. A booming laugh echoed from the elder. His father doubted a mere youth could conjure such astronomical wealth. Banish your worldly concerns, his father commanded. Focus entirely on your own ascension. Then, a second explosive revelation followed. A summons from the majestic Ilsung Hospital. The Grand Orthopedics Division had selected him. A divine program for joint reconstruction and rebirth. He would cross their threshold in a matter of days. The miracle extended further. Every procedure, every elixir, completely free of charge. His father praised the heavens for this sudden fortune. But a cold dread slithered down Juhyuk's spine. Do not bear our burdens, the elder insisted. Juhyuk forced out an agreement, promising an imminent return. Ilsung Hospital stood at the apex of medical supremacy in Korea. A titan backed by a colossal conglomerate. It was a miracle of light. Yet, a terrifying shadow lurked beneath it. Then, another transmission struck. Minhyuk. A storm of unnatural miracles was violently reshaping his family. Juhyuk's mind spun with deadly paranoia. Minhyuk's voice crackled with rage. Had he seen their mother's war declaration? His brother sought absolute destruction for the corporate scum. She had ground her bones to dust for them. She mastered every grueling trial of sales. Juhyuk knew the depth of her sacrifice. Minhyuk then vowed to empty his own meager treasury to fuel the impending war. Juhyuk countered. The boy needed a computational artifact for his studies. But Minhyuk brushed off the concern. His coffers overflowed even after academy fees. A miraculous grant of gold had descended upon him. He stood victorious within the academy's sanctum. Minhyuk praised the cosmic balance. He truly believed that righteous living commanded divine rewards. Juhyuk's voice turned lethal. Identify the benefactor. Minhyuk spoke the name that shattered the illusion. The Awakener Management Administration. A national blessing granted to the masses, or so he claimed. Focus on your training, Juhyuk whispered. The final puzzle piece snapped violently into place. This was no divine intervention. The supreme lawyer. The miracle surgery. The sudden influx of wealth. Every single thread. All manipulated by the unseen hand of the Awakener Management Administration. Elsewhere, Kwangil moved through the city in a dark transport. A sudden transmission interrupted the silence. A challenger demanded an audience. Kwangil accepted the summons with terrifying calm. He offered a chariot to transport his guest to a feast. They sat across from each other in a hidden, soundproof chamber. Explain your interference, Juhyuk demanded. Kwangil feigned absolute ignorance. The legal titan, the miracle healing, the golden grant. Juhyuk fired the accusations like arrows. It was an absolute necessity, Kwangil replied, his voice like ice. Juhyuk's aura flared. The man wasn't even masking his divine play. Kwangil delivered the cold truth. Mortal chains of despair would anchor Juhyuk's soul. Such petty distractions breed weakness, and weakness would halt his terrifying ascension within the tower. The cruel logic was undeniable. Yet, a fierce rebellion burned within Juhyuk's chest. They had invaded his sanctuary without permission. Such divine intervention belonged only to the supreme elites. He was bound by mere mortal terms. Bang! Kwangil's palm struck the table like a thunderclap. A pristine parchment slid across the wood. The ultra-elite covenant. Sign your destiny, Kwangil commanded. The supreme pact lay waiting. An overwhelming pressure crushed Juhyuk from all sides. Kwangil had orchestrated this absolute trap perfectly. Yet, Juhyuk hesitated at the precipice. He viewed his own terrifying power as nothing but ordinary. Kwangil rose, an imposing mountain of authority. Do you still claim mediocrity? He roared. After obliterating boundaries that defied humanity itself? The words struck Juhyuk like a physical blow. Silence reigned supreme. How could he argue? He had annihilated 24 floors consecutively. He had claimed the legendary S+ rank. His humility had warped into an insult to his own monstrous strength. Juhyuk choked on the immense pressure. He begged the man to retract this overwhelming honor. But Kwangil invoked the recent bloodbath with Jose. Ascend to the elite vanguard, Kwangil declared. Claim your rightful throne, for you have conquered the impossible. Juhyuk waved him down. The heavy stairs felt suffocating. Kwangil leaned in closer. His voice carried absolute certainty. Sign this contract. These pathetic disruptions will vanish forever. You will stand untouchable, shielded like a sovereign ruler. But Juhyuk frowned. The phantom chains of a security detail felt suffocating. He hated the thought of constant shadows. Furthermore, the dungeon recordings posed a fatal risk. The elite contract demanded visual proof of his ascensions. That was a deadly trap. He could never expose Jon and Gobang. Their existence had to remain a deeply buried secret. Guangil sensed the hesitation. He shattered those doubts instantly. The recordings are yours to control. The guards bend to your will. Those words struck like lightning. Juyuk finally locked eyes with him. Define your terms. Juyuk demanded answers. Guangil laid out the blueprint, a fortress designed for one, impenetrable and isolated. His guards would only emerge when he breached the outside world. Even your bloodline will be shielded. Juyuk clenched his fists. Do not fall for the temptation. But Guangil delivered the killing blow. Sign this elite pact. 2 grand estates will be yours, a sanctuary for you and an eternal fortress for your family. A critical hit to his very soul. The magnitude of the offer crushed his resistance, a dream manifesting into reality. The glorious vision overwhelmed his mind. Yet Juyuk held his ground. The stakes were too monumental for a hasty vow. He demanded a moment to weigh his fate. Guangil merely smiled. The hunger in the boy's eyes had already betrayed him. He promised a seamless transition of power. The Supreme Director's will backed this offer. The pristine parchment slid across the table. A single signature would rewrite his destiny. Visions of a grand sanctuary clouded Juyuk's mind. His fingers gripped the pen, but suddenly his hand froze. Guangil's eyes narrowed. A sudden chill gripped Juyuk's heart. The tides of fate were rushing too violently. I need more time. The demand hung in the tense air. Guangil questioned the delay. Juyuk offered nothing but unfiltered truth. I must consult my shadows before binding my soul. Guangil bowed his head in silent agreement. Dawn broke on a new day. The summoning circle roared to life. Jon materialized with a boastful sneer. The legendary special super rare assassin had descended. An astral radiance erupted from his form. A blinding, catastrophic light. Juyuk shielded his eyes. A cry of sheer agony tore from his throat. The evolution had been achieved. Jon now stood at the pinnacle. An absolute SSR rank. Extinguish that blasted aura, Juyuk commanded through gritted teeth. Jon smirked, questioning the absence of their brute companion. Juyuk's tone turned dead serious. Before we conquer the 25th floor, we must speak in absolute secrecy. The assassin nodded with dark approval. A wise tactical choice. That brainless meat shield could never grasp the gravity of our schemes. Juyuk laid out the chessboard. The Awakener Management Administration had made their move. A monumental crossroads lay before him. Languish in the shadows of mediocrity, or ascend to the glorious ranks of the elite? His mind was completely torn. He sought the assassin's cunning wisdom. Jon did not hesitate for a microsecond. Claim the elite throne. You command the power of a sovereign. It is time the world bowed to your national authority. But doubt gnawed at Juyuk's resolve. The elite path meant a merciless ascension, dragged violently toward the 60th floor and beyond. Jon dismissed the fear with an arrogant laugh. We will obliterate those realms with ease. I will forge my body into a weapon. Juyuk vowed to never drag them down. The assassin instantly shattered that notion. Forget the front lines. Plunging into the abyss is a fool's errand. Your survival is our ultimate weapon. Breathe, exist, and endure. Juyuk flared with fierce defiance. But Jon's gaze turned chillingly cold. Defy death, and the world is yours. In the primordial realm of his birth, hordes of mythical SSR titans slumbered in the void, waiting for a master. Keep your heart beating. That is your only sovereign duty. The day of absolute convergence is coming. Every legendary soul will manifest at your command, and they will kneel in eternal subjugation before your throne. Bound by the ancient 3 laws, they will become your indestructible army. Is that the extent of my dominion? Juyuk's voice trembled with dark anticipation. A wicked shadow crossed Jon's face. Beyond the fragile systems of men, slumber the calamitous demigods, beings of world-ending devastation. Juyuk's eyes ignited with a terrifying hunger. Could my authority truly chain such cosmic horrors? The assassin spoke the bitter truth. Your current vessel would shatter instantly, so heed the ultimate strategy. Cheat death, spam the cosmic roulette. Your random summons are not a gamble. They are your apocalyptic trump card. The celestial clock resets every 1 month, 12 rolls of the divine dice per year. Harvest the right artifacts, and that number explodes. Within a single year, a legion of apocalyptic monsters could march under your banner. But the cruel hands of fate could still betray him. A string of curses could yield nothing but trash. The system timer ticked down mercilessly. 19 days, 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 8 seconds. Jon's aura suddenly darkened. He issued a singular, absolute command. The right to breach the unknown must remain yours alone. Yield to no mortal authority. Juyuk's breath hitched in shock. He had never considered defying the Empire's strict ascension mandates. To claim absolute control over his own destiny? The assassin's voice dripped with venom. This is a matter of life and death. Surrender that power, and the parasites will swarm. The greedy aristocrats will scream for your blood, forcing you into the jaws of the abyss. They will march you into a massacre before your wings have grown. Jon's murderous intent bled into his words. Juyuk felt a chill crawl down his spine. This was no mere tactical advice. It was the phantom pain of a tragic past. Never become a pawn on someone else's board. Carve that condition in stone, and the Empire's gold is yours to plunder. Juyuk stared in sheer disbelief. The rebel assassin was actually endorsing the government's leash. Deep gratitude resonated in Juyuk's voice. The time for counsel had ended. The massive form of Gobang erupted from the shadows. The brute bowed deeply to his master, but behind him an oppressive aura flared. Will you ignore your superior, worm? A true warrior bows to no random street dog. Gobang grunted with heavy defiance. Jon's killing intent vanished into a mocking laugh. Behold, true majesty, I have ascended to the realm of gods. Special, super, rare. He spat the title like venom. 2 majestic letters of power elevate me above your pathetic existence. You are nothing but base-level trash. Gobang's massive shoulders slumped in sorrow. He muttered a grievance against the cruel mockery. Silence, you peasant. The hierarchy is absolute, and you are trapped at the bottom. The giant warrior flinched, refusing to meet the assassin's eyes. A chasm of power now separated the two shadows. Even a simpleton could feel the suffocating pressure of a higher existence. Juyuk silently etched a vow into his heart. The next divine rune of evolution belongs to Gobang. He shifted his focus to the coming slaughter. Can we secure another platinum insignia? Jon burst into a maniacal cackle. A platinum badge? I am a god among men now. The obsidian gates of the 25th floor violently shattered. A brutal decree flashed across the system. Annihilate 100 demonic orcs and sever the chieftain's head. The time limit, 10 hours. A green tidal wave of roaring beasts immediately surged toward them. Juyuk's muscles coiled, ready to taste blood. But the assassin stepped in front of him. This massacre is my coronation, a blood-soaked celebration of my new power. He commanded the brute to act as the anvil. Gobang roared, charging straight into the meat grinder. The giant launched his massive frame into the heavens. The savage horde halted, staring up at the falling meteor in sheer terror. That was the fatal mistake. Jon vanished. The supreme predator was unleashed. Only a blinding flash of silver traced his deadly path. A supersonic phantom ripping reality apart. The sheer velocity stole Juyuk's breath. A storm of phantom blades erupted from the void. They skewered the frontline beasts with absolute precision. Then, the death sentence was spoken. Blade explosion. The impaled monsters erupted into fountains of gore. Shockwaves shredded everything in their radius. This was no mere explosive art. It was heavy artillery raining destruction upon the battlefield. A squad of desperate beasts lunged at his blind spot. Savage spears impaled the assassin's back. Twisted grins stretched across their faces. Then, absolute horror struck. The body dissolved into meaningless ash. The true demon materialized right behind their necks. Vile ambush activated. A symphony of decapitations followed. Heads rolled into the dust with zero resistance. A sadistic grin danced on Jon's lips. The surviving monsters realized they were not hunters. They were the prey. Their weapons clattered from trembling hands. Why the long faces, pigs? A toxic aura coated his twin daggers. The nightmare has only just begun. Juyuk's eyes widened in realization. If he didn't strike now, the assassin would devour the entire floor. Shadow step initiated. Juyuk became a phantom in the wind. He hurled himself toward a separate squad of beasts. Bloodthirsty eyes locked onto his fragile frame. The assassin's warnings echoed in his mind. Cowardice disguised as survival. But his soul rejected the path of the weak. He refused to be a fragile king trembling behind his monsters. His loved ones deserved a protector, not a liability. Juyuk roared, charging the vanguard head-on. The era of hiding in the shadows was over. Absolute power was the only currency in this tower. A rusty cleaver sliced through the air. Juyuk dropped low, evading death by a hair. A brutal explosive kick launched the beast forward. The monster ate dirt, eating the humiliating blow. It scrambled to its feet, bewildered by the human's sudden ferocity. Juyak unleashed his power. The primordial thunderclap staff hummed with ancient energy. First form, soul-chasing thunderbolt. He brought the weapon down with godlike force. The strike shattered the creature's skull. Crimson rained across the battlefield. The beast crumpled. Its dying shriek pierced the air. A massive horde charged forward. Juyak did not flinch. Shadow step. He became a phantom in the dark. He carved through their ranks with lethal precision. Suddenly, he froze. The system chimed. A blue glow illuminated the shadows. Primordial thunderclap staff. Second form. Cascading thunderbolts unlocked. A violent thrill coursed through his veins. The next level of absolute power was his. Divine knowledge flooded his mind. The terrifying mechanics etched into his soul. This power was volatile. This power was devastating. He spun the heavy mace. The air crackled. He triggered the second form. Bloodthirsty monsters lunged for the kill. He met their charge with a blinding spin. Cascading thunderbolts erupted. Heaven's wrath fell upon the earth. Blinding lightning shattered the ground. The raging energy splintered into 5 destructive paths. Multiple beasts burned simultaneously. A dark smirk twisted his lips. Wide-scale destruction was now at his fingertips. Nearby, Jon watched the unnatural storm. Confusion clouded his eyes. Since when did mere beasts control lightning? Then, he saw Juyak amidst the sparks. Utter disbelief struck him. Pure shock paralyzed the assassin. He snapped back to reality and dashed forward. He tore across the battlefield. Just inches from the blazing aura, he slammed his boots into the dirt. Frustration boiled over. Jon barked at his master for his reckless display of power. They had a tactical plan, one enemy at a time. Juyak offered a quick apology. Then, reality hit him. Why bow his head to his own summon? A spark of irritation ignited in his chest. He refused to cower anymore. He glared at his servant. He might be a weakling in the real world, but within this nightmare tower, he was a god. Jon did not flinch. His voice remained cold and absolute. The master's survival was the only thing that mattered. The cold logic only fueled his anger. Juyak pointed a defiant finger into the abyss. Bring forth the war chief. Let the ultimate nightmare show its face. He swore to charge the beast. He would crush its skull with his own 2 hands. A catastrophic explosion shattered his boast. The earth violently quaked. The colossal orc warchief manifested from the shadows. Pure terror seized Juyak. He shrieked for his assassin. Jon grabbed him by the collar. They fled like desperate prey. The color drained completely from the master's face. Bitter regret choked him. The assassin had been right. Jon hurled his master behind the hulking Gobong. He issued a lethal command. Eradicate the warchief at once. The towering boss locked its terrifying gaze upon them. Jon drew his blades. He ordered Juyak to stay back. Gobong stood as an unbreakable shield. The 2 summons launched their assault. The warchief released an apocalyptic roar. A golden aura ignited around Gobong's colossal hand. His terrifying fist collided with the enemy's giant blade. Overwhelming brute force prevailed. The heavy steel crumpled like paper. Absolute dread washed over the boss. Gobang showed no mercy. Dual fists crashed down upon the monstrous shoulders. A deafening crack echoed as bones pulverized. In that exact fraction of a second, the phantom assassin vanished. Wild ambush activated. Lethal steel gleamed in the dark. A clean cut severed the beast's neck. The giant head rolled across the blood-soaked floor. The 25th floor was conquered. The golden light of ascension enveloped Juyak. His grand prize materialized. A 2.5 kilogram magic stone pulsed with ancient mana. A blinding golden S+ flashed across the void. He had dominated the 25th floor of the Korea Black Tower. A rare platinum badge forged itself in his hand. The 26th floor now awaited his wrath. He stepped out of the dark realm. A legendary milestone was reached. 25 badges triggered a divine blessing. The encore perk selection opened. Juyak knew exactly the magnitude of this moment. The glowing panel offered absolute power. Trait enhancement. Skill copy. Random item. Summoned entity rank up. Destinies hung in the balance. This was the ultimate treasure. He struck the glowing rune without hesitation. His unique awakened trait surged with boundless energy. Only a fool would reject the path of absolute evolution. The core of his power expanded. The majestic status window materialized. His legend was written in light. His name. His bond to the Korea Black Tower. His ascension to level 26. His divine trait glowed brightly. The Summoner. 3 legendary warriors could now march under his banner. Currently, 2 monsters answered his call: the Phantom Assassin and the Iron Juggernaut. His sovereign arsenal was absolute. Designated summon, random summon, summon release. He wielded the authority to breach the tower daily. An infinite dimensional vault answered his thoughts. His martial arsenal struck fear into the abyss. Shadow Step, primordial thunderclap staff. Pure adrenaline spiked through his heart. His sovereign domain had expanded. The simultaneous summon limit shattered. 3 warriors could now stand by his side. An unstoppable 4-man vanguard was born. 18 long days remained before the chaotic portal opened again. Anticipation burned within him. What legendary beast would join his ranks next? But the battlefield could wait. The mortal realm demanded his attention. He offered his fearsome warriors a feast. Jon demanded the fiery tteokbokki. Disbelief flashed across the master's face. The deadly assassin was historically defenseless against earthly spice. The rogue stood tall. He was an SSR rank now. Mortal weaknesses were a thing of the past. Juyak scoffed at the dangerous boast. He wished the fool luck. The crimson feast was served. He honored his warriors for the blood spilled on the 25th floor. Gobang devoured his share with monstrous ease. Jon stared in horror. Was the fire not burning the giant's soul? The Titan spoke with absolute calm. There was no heat, only a mild sweetness. The assassin challenged his fate. He consumed a single crimson bite. Hellfire erupted in his mouth. The SSR rogue crumpled to the floor. He writhed in agony like a poisoned rat. Gobang watched the dying rogue with cold indifference. He advised his master to discard the pathetic creature. The assassin would perish soon. A superior warrior should be pulled from the void to replace him. The conquering of the 25th floor shifted his destiny. The heavy secret of his power could no longer stay hidden. The truth had to be unleashed. He returned to his mortal home bearing luxurious gifts. His brother stared at the extravagant feast. Where did a nobody find such vast wealth? A mysterious smile crossed his face. The grand revelation would come soon. His mother trembled at the reckless display of gold. Fear of debt clouded her eyes. She begged him to reverse the purchase. His father raised a quiet, steady hand. Let the boy have his victory. Storms of hardship had battered their bloodline. This grand feast was a shield against the dark times. The old man commanded peace for the night. The family united around the hearth. Warmth filled the room as old memories flowed. The patriarch praised the divine quality of the feast. His mother's gentle laughter broke the tension. She presented sweet offerings to the ravenous warriors of the house. A heavy burden lifted from his chest. The darkest shadows had finally passed. The crushing legal battles, the desperate medical wars, all obliterated. He drew a deep, steadying breath. The air grew heavy with absolute gravity. The moment of truth arrived. He declared his ascension. He was no longer a mere mortal. He was an awakened player. A deafening silence swallowed the room. Utter disbelief masked their faces. To them, this was a cruel illusion. Words alone could not shatter their reality. He needed undeniable proof. He summoned the guild executive, Gwang-il. Dawn brought a new reality. A majestic black chariot carried them toward the heavens. The towering fortress of the guild loomed ahead. His mother's voice trembled with awe. Was her bloodline truly blessed? Gwang-il delivered the absolute truth. Her son was a national treasure, a weapon of supreme value. Paralysis gripped the father and brother. Elite player. The legendary title echoed in their minds. The executive guided them to the sanctuary above. Juyak stepped forward with unquestionable authority. A pitch-black sovereign card swept across the scanner. Heavy steel doors parted. A sprawling paradise revealed itself. A kingdom fit for an awakened lord. The era of suffering was over. That concludes this epic saga for today. Hunger for more weekly destruction? The next legendary chapters drop on my second sanctuary, Manhwa Updater. Do not fall behind in this vicious world. Secure your place. Join the Supreme Update Legion. I salute you all for witnessing this journey. Maintain your aura. Stay absolutely legendary. I will meet you on the next battlefield.